Chapter 497. My Mr. Right. Do you have a fetish for powerful female captains? Chen Guang paused. He was about to reach the Purple Rose Bar. Why? The Radiance Pirates have been around for 25 years. They are rising like a comet, unstoppable. They are now one of the top 50 powers in the entire Sea of Time. Their captains, Lady Cord and Annie, are known as the two most powerful women in the Sea of Time. Many people even think that in a few years, the Radiance Pirates will replace one of the 12 Poseidons. For the first time in history, there will be two women among the 12 Poseidons of the Sea of Time. Everyone knows that the reason why Lady Cord can't break through the shackles of the 12 Poseidons is because she only has one hand, one leg, and one eye. But once she is reborn, no one will be able to stop her. Chen Guang expressed his astonishment. This is going against the heavens. F***ck me. He held on to the bar's door. Bob, go in first. Tell any of your old friends in the bar that I want to use their piano. I need to sit for a while and calm down. No matter what, whether it was Annie or Ling Qin, he had to find a way to contact one of them. Any one of them would be able to protect him. Who would have thought that the old man would have to rely on a woman to protect him in his own world? Forget it. Let's not think about that for now. Annie and Ling Qin were already at the top of the pyramid in the Sea of Time. Old Bob didn't even dare to mention Annie's name in private. He had just arrived and was unfamiliar with the place. He probably wouldn't be able to contact them for a while. Let's see if the people of the Sea of Time could give him faith first. The Purple Rose Bar was located at the junction of Bell Street. It was a small two-story building that covered an area of about 300 to 400 square meters. The first floor was the bar's lobby, and the second floor was filled with the wretched transactions that the people of the Sea of Time loved to see. This bar was located at the border of the slums, and its positioning wasn't very high-end. Those who would come here to spend money were either lower-class residents of Treasure Island, such as people like Old Bob, or most of them were foreign pirates. People with taste would go to the wealthy area in the city center to spend money. As soon as Chen Guang pushed the door open, he smelled a strange odor. It was very unique, as if the body odor of dozens of men who had never taken a bath had been mixed together. However, the strong smell of alcohol had neutralized the stench. There was also the fragrance of roasted chicken, duck, and goose dripping with hot oil. The hall was very lively. Bare-chested, bronze-skinned men gathered in groups of 2s and 3s. Sometimes, they would laugh and drink with each other. Sometimes, they would arm wrestle with each other on the wooden tables of the bar. The loser would be dejected, and the winner would clamor that they had to buy him a drink. Otherwise, if they met someone with great strength, the only loser would be the bar table. At this time, the waitresses in the bar would stand in front of the group of men with a tearful expression and pitifully ask them to pay. Among the 70 or 80 guests here, there weren't any elegant people. They were all dressed differently. Some wore animal skins, some wore close-fitting brown leather armor, and some wore neat linen clothes. Most of them were bare-chested. In the large hall, the most elegantly dressed person was probably the bartender behind the counter. He was wearing a black vest and a white shirt. The tall bartender was pouring cocktails one after another with dazzling movements. Bob, on the other hand, was arguing with a young blonde in a lace dress behind him. He seemed to be very agitated. Chen Guang walked over. Mr. Wright, this is Janet, the current owner of the Purple Rose. She doesn't agree with you using the piano. Old Bob himself did not believe in his heart that this Mr. Wright could play the pianoforte, but it had to be done. Chen Guang turned to look at Janet. This girl was roughly 15 or 16 with a well-developed figure. It was just that her face was covered in freckles that ruined her beauty. At the same time, she had a stubborn look on her face. Sir, I don't know you, and I've never heard of you. My mother, who passed away last month, spent a lot of money to buy this piano. Although it hasn't been played for several years, I can't let an unknown person put his hand on it. What if it's damaged? Janet said stubbornly. Old Bob's face darkened. Janet, do you know who you're talking to? You'll bring disaster to yourself and your bar. Chen Guang waved his hand. All right, old Bob, shut up. Miss Janet, how much is this piano worth? You're Mr. Right, right? Do you want to buy my piano? 30,000 gold berries. Janet put up 3 fingers. Old Bob sprang to his feet. Nonsense. 30,000 is brand new, but the dust on your piano can be used to build walls. It's been here for 10 years. Janet was neither servile nor overbearing. But in these 10 years, it's only been played once, hasn't it? Uncle Bob, you're a regular customer of Purple Rose. You know best. Although it's old, it's also very new. Actually, I don't want to sell it. This is the memory my mother left me. You know how much my mother paid to have it played once. Here's 30,000 gold berries. I'm not buying it. I just need it to be played a few times. If you really break it, this money is my compensation to you. Otherwise, consider it a gift from me. Suddenly, Chen Guang took out a big sack from his back and threw it at Janet. The sack contained a total of 300 gold coins, each equivalent to 100 gold berries. F***CK. Mr. Wright, where did you get the money? Bob felt like he was about to collapse. He'd been eating so much for the past few days. He didn't even give a dime the whole time. Suddenly throwing out 30,000 gold berries was really sad. Chen Guang grinned and patted the old man on the shoulder. Bob, you have to understand that no amount of money can buy eternal immortality. Think about my former crew and captain. I wasn't sure before, but now I can tell you clearly that this is indeed my credit. You know. The 30,000 gold berries was directly exchanged with his faith points. The price was lower than he imagined. It only cost 300 faith points. It seemed that his existing nearly 390,000 faith points were enough for him to squander for many years. Okay, sir, but when you go back tonight, can you first buy a dining table? It's detrimental to your noble status to squat on the floor and eat. Chen Guang ignored him. He had already climbed up the stairs and sat in front of the piano on the high platform in the corner of the hall. This fully handmade piano was actually not as shabby as old Bob said. Although it couldn't find anyone to play, whether it was the former owner who had passed away or Janet who had just taken over the heavy responsibility, they actually valued it very much. There were people taking care of it every day, and the surface of the piano looked smooth and shiny. Hey! Who is this guy? Is he going to play the piano? Don't talk nonsense. Why would a bard come here? Shorty, get down here. Don't disturb our drinking, or I'll cut you into 8 pieces. As soon as Chen Guang sat down and rolled up his sleeves, many men below had already started to make a ruckus. For the bars near the slums, the appearance of every bard was a big deal. Even the noblest gold and silver bar in the center of the city could only find a bard to play twice a month on average. A few years ago, when there was a concert in Purple Rose, it was even advertised 3 months in advance. On that day, the entire street was filled with poor people who heard the news. Janet held the bag in her hand with a complicated expression, but she had no chance to regret it. Before Chen Guang played the first note, even Bob, who had accompanied him here, didn't believe that he could really play the piano. However, it only took Chen Guang 5 seconds to conquer the ears of these country bumpkins. When the first note of cannon wandered in the bar, the noisy crowd instantly fell silent. Everyone's mouths were wide open. They couldn't believe their eyes, let alone their ears. This was really an amazing, talented bard. They had never heard this song before, but it was so beautiful. Everyone seemed to be surrounded by countless elf-like notes. They even had hallucinations of seeing elves cheering and jumping around them. The ethereal sound of the piano shook the hearts of these pirates, who usually only knew how to kill and drink blood. It was as if they had returned to their youth, returning to the naivety and ignorance before they set foot on the sea. What a beautiful sound! The crisp sound of the piano seemed to be hitting the softest ribs in the depths of these people's hearts. Bob's hands were clenched, his heart was beating fast, and his eyes were full of disbelief. He was even more shocked than when he had confirmed Chen Guang's identity for the first time. Oh my God, I've spent so many days with a noble bard. Yes, he had almost forgotten that Chen Guang was the second mate of the N Royal, because a bard was so rare. Janet's hands clasped her chest tightly, her heart beating with the notes. Is this the magic of a bard? Why is my heart beating so fast? Why is my face so red? Why do my eyes seem to see a sky full of stars? The hot-tempered drunkards put down the wine glasses in their hands and turned their heads at the same time. They looked at the performer on the stage with reverence and confusion. It was the bard who seemed to have descended from the sky. They even subconsciously held their breaths, afraid to disturb this person. Chen Guang had only used one song to conquer the men and women in the bar. When the music stopped, the bar was silent. Some people even turned their faces away and gently wiped away the tears in their red eyes. Chen Guang put his hands away and looked around. He was also shocked by the situation below. My God, is this necessary? Although this is the divine song, canon, isn't your reaction a little too intense? Hey! That bald bearded man. I see that you're big and burly, and your body is comparable to Shark O'Neill's. What do you mean by pulling the tablecloth and wiping away your tears while listening to a piano? Also, little girl, please don't take off your clothes while approaching me, please be more reserved. Previously, Chen Guang thought that old Bob was bragging, recklessly raising the bard's status in the pugilistic world. But when he really performed a song, he realized that old Bob might have been wrong. A miracle. This is an incredible miracle. I am Boldev, the vicious wolf from the northern sea. I have roamed the 5 seas for 300 years, but I have never heard such beautiful music. Sir, you remind me of Sir Brooke's elegant demeanor. In the corner of the hall, a man dressed in the most luxurious clothes was the first to react. He stood up abruptly and clapped wildly with a flushed face. This was actually an undying rank expert. Previously, he had only brought his men to the corner to drink quietly, as if he had no intention of revealing his identity. However, Chen Guang's song, Canon, made this man so excited that he introduced himself, just to make Chen Guang look at him and nod his head in approval. Soon after, the pirates stood up one by one, crazily cheering and screaming. Yes, the previous Chen Guang was unknown, but without a doubt, just based on the song he had just played, he was destined to become a great bard. Mr. Right. My God. My Lord. My God. Please forgive my previous presumptuousness, please continue to let me be your follower. Old Bob pounced over and laid his head under the piano. Chen Guang took off his shoes and threw them down, hitting Bob's head. Idiot! Get up! Don't embarrass me! At this moment, he saw a wisp of white smoke rising from Bob's head and flying towards him. Daily production of 2 points of faith. Success. There's hope. Not only Bob, in the huge bar, at least a few people had white smoke rising from their heads. It was the faith that Chen Guang urgently needed. Although the total production of faith from these people might not reach 10 points per day, it was already enough. Chen Guang just wanted to verify this matter today. Apart from that, he had only played one piece. Although they all recognized his talent, but just like what Boldev said before, in this world, there was still a musician as powerful as Brooke. Only a country bumpkin who had never seen a bardic performance, or someone like Bob who had been brainwashed by him many times, would recognize him as the strongest in the world after just a short piece. For example, Boldev, although his face was full of worship and his mood couldn't be faked, he didn't provide any faith. Chen Guang wasn't in a hurry. He waved his hand and pointed to the other men who had given him faith and said, "Janet, give each of these friends a glass of rum. It's my treat." Bob pointed to himself. "Mister, what about me?" "Shut up." At this moment, Chen Guang threw the other shoe down. He stood up barefooted, pressed his hands down, and made a gesture for everyone to be quiet. Then he said, "Hello everyone, my name is Wright, and I am the most talented bard in the world. Please remember this sentence, and in 4 hours, you will repeat this sentence to everyone you meet." Boldev seemed to want to refute, but in the end, he didn't dare to open his mouth. He just sat down unwillingly. Obviously, Brooke's position in his heart was very high. Chen Guang was also paying attention to him. He thought, "Young man, don't worry, you'll soon know whether I'm bragging or not." To Alice, Autumn Whisper, Croatian Rhapsody, Moonlight Song, Swan Lake, in just one afternoon, these classic songs from the hands of a master, in the hands of Chen Guang, the most powerful pianist in history, a humanoid piano player, fell from the sky and appeared in front of these people's ears. Every single one of them had never appeared in the Sea of Moments before, but every single one of them was so moving. Boldev's mood changed from worship at the very beginning to doubt Brooke, and finally to trembling all over and madly worshipping Brooke. It only took an entire afternoon for this to happen. 4 hours later, Boldev slowly got up, his right hand gradually turned black, and a burst of black gas came out from it. His armament hockey has advanced. The Purple Rose Bar was packed to the brim with hundreds of people. They were filled with admiration and speechlessness. They are worshipping the strong Boldev, and they are worshipping Mr. Wright, who is sitting on the high platform and playing the movement of God. That's all for today's performance. Thank you for your support. Chen Guang got up and took a deep breath. Hundreds of faith points turned into mist and gushed out from the forehead of each of the hundreds of people present. 1,000 points a day. When he thought of the 178 billion people in the world of the Sea of Moments, Chen Guang was overwhelmed by this sudden happiness. "I'm not dreaming, am I?" It seems that the bards in the Sea of Moments are very popular. If he can get each person in the Sea of Moments to provide an average of 1 point of faith points, it will be a total of 178 billion. The flow of time in the Sea of Moments and the real world is about 365 to 1. After he goes out, will he become rich in a second? Oh no, become rich in a second. Wishful thinking, you can still sleep. Ruri's voice came at an untimely time. She came to pour cold water on him. Chen Guang was unhappy. Why? Why? Isn't it all faith points? Ruri smirked. When you play Dota or World of Warcraft, can the gold coins you earn in the game be used to buy a computer? Chen Guang, no. Isn't that it? The Sea of Moments is just one of the 3,000 lower planes of the Holy Grail, which is one level lower than the real world. The faith points you earn here, isn't it the same as the gold coins you earn in the game? Is it hard to understand? Chen Guang face-bombed. I understand the logic, but my heart still hurts. Something isn't right. Ling Qin's faith points are different. I've also noticed that person. She's not a native of the Temporal Ocean. Her soul is fundamentally different from the souls of the people in the Temporal Ocean. They can't be mentioned in the same breath. It was rare for Luli to explain. When I found out the truth, my tears fell. I really have no fighting spirit now. Chen Guang was a little bored. Ruri consoled, "Don't be too desperate. If you can complete the test of the Sea of Moments in the real world and create a statue, I have a way to make use of the faith points here. When you played World of Warcraft, you could buy a 45 renminbi card with 3,000 gold coins. Isn't that the same logic?" Chen Guang was overjoyed. "That's great. 178 billion divided by... Don't count, it's not that much, it's very difficult to convert, the levels of the planes are very strict, even if it's only one level difference, it's a world of difference. Based on my guess, by the time you build a statue, you'll at most get 10,000 a day." Ruri had been pouring cold water on him for decades. Chen Guang was satisfied. "All right, it's actually not bad." Chapter 498. The next day, the Purple Rose Bar announced its closure, disappointing many pirates and music fans who came after hearing the news. Yesterday's incident happened in a hurry, but when Chen Guang played the second half of the song, the people on Treasure Island, whether noble or lowly, began to rush over. However, the Purple Rose Bar was only so big. After squeezing 800 people inside, there was almost no place to stay. The latecomers, even the noble and powerful immortal rank pirates, could only wait outside the door bitterly, trying to get the Purple Rose Bar to open the window so that they could listen to the music coming from the window. If it was another place, how could these brave and ruthless pirates be so obedient? Even if it was just a matter of going to the toilet, they would draw their swords against each other. However, it was rumored that there was an unprecedentedly powerful bard sitting inside, so they didn't dare to act rashly. Usually, the strength of a bard was judged by the movement that the bard mastered. After all, except for a small number of strong dual cultivators, such as Brook, the bard's combat strength was not very good, but no one dared to look down on them. Just like yesterday's Buldev the Vicious Wolf. Although it was well known that he increased his hockey on the spot while enjoying the movement, it was still very rare. Being able to make others stronger would earn the respect of the world. There were even many powerful pirates who had been helped by the bard and regarded him as their own soul teacher. The truly terrifying thing about a bard was that behind him stood countless powerful pirates who had been helped by him. If there was no irreconcilable hatred, no one would be willing to offend a bard. After a night of brewing, the news spread throughout Treasure Island, so many people came to the door of the Purple Rose Bar early today. However, the bar was closed. More and more people gathered outside, and everyone was very anxious. They were afraid that it would be like yesterday, that there would be no seats if they went in late. Finally, everyone elected someone to knock on the door. The one elected was the deputy captain of the Treasure Island Guards, Gale. He was close to the previous lady boss of the Purple Rose Bar, Janet's mother. There were even rumors that he was Janet's father. Although he never admitted it, it was indeed Gale who took care of the Purple Rose Bar all these years. Janet's mother was able to maintain such a bar on Treasure Island as a woman. "Janet. I'm your Uncle Gale, open the door." Gale carefully knocked on the wooden door. After a short while, Janet opened the door and welcomed Gale in. She then bowed to the people waiting outside and said, "Janet apologizes to everyone for making everyone wait outside for so long. Please don't worry, Mr. Wright has already purchased Purple Rose. The store needs a few days of renovation and will reopen in a few days. Welcome to Wright's Bar." I'm your manager, Janet." The little girl made a mischievous expression, and the crowd outside immediately burst into thunderous cheers. The reason why they rushed here was that they were afraid that Bard Wright would leave after yesterday's performance. After all, everyone knew that Bard Wright was unrestrained, mysterious, and had a high status. She didn't expect him to buy this bar and change it to his own name. What did this mean? This meant that Mr. Wright would be performing here in the future. At this time, Chen Guang also walked out, and the people outside became even more excited. "He's Mr. Wright. Mr. Wright. I'm a Bood from West Blue. Please let me listen to your music, I'm willing to pay 10,000 gold berries. Mr. Right, please let me be your follower. I have observation hockey. I'm Mary from the Bloody Mary bar in the city. Mr. Right, please come to my bar and play a show, I'm willing to serve you for a year. Everyone shouted loudly and subconsciously began to crowd forward. Mr. Right, do you need me to stop them? Boldev gritted his teeth and moved his sturdy body forward. After one night, Boldev, the North Sea Vicious Wolf, has given up his identity as the leader of the Vicious Wolf Pirates and chose to stay in Purple Rose, stay with Chen Guang, and become a follower of Chen Guang. Although he had a rough appearance, just like his nickname, Vicious Wolf, he had keen insight. Boldev knows very well that as long as Mr. Right is willing to take him in and serve him, there will be many opportunities to listen to his performance. Sooner or later, under his influence, he will be able to comprehend the legendary Haoshiku hockey. Chen Guang raised his hand slightly with a calm expression and pressed it down. Everyone, don't quarrel. Be quiet, please be quiet. Although his voice was very light, his words carried enormous weight. The noisy crowd quieted down in an instant. The change was so fast that Chen Guang himself was surprised. But he quickly adjusted his mood and put a warm smile on his face. Hello everyone, I'm Right, the owner of the Right Bar. As many of you can imagine, I'm tired of being homeless and traveling. Now, I want to stop my pursuit of truth and share with you the philosophy of life that I've learned from the sun, the tides, the storms, the quiet and serene night sky, the sunny noon, and the endless beautiful scenery. There was no need to prepare a draft when bragging. Bob, who was hiding behind him, muttered, Mr. Right really knows how to brag, he's at most 100 years old. Old Bob, what did you say? Boldev next to him asked. Bob's eyes widened. Boldev. I'm Mr. Right's first follower. You have to call me Mr. Bob. Okay, little Bob. Bob was furious, but there was nothing he could do. With Boldev's age as an undead rank expert, calling him little Bob really wasn't inappropriate. Chen Guang didn't have time to care about what the two people behind him were whispering about, but continued to maintain his noble, elegant, mysterious, and imposing appearance. Sure enough, the crowd outside was moved by his saintly appearance. Heavens! How poetic! Mr. Right has actually lived for thousands of years, who would have thought that there would be such a great and almost immortal bard above the sea? Silently comprehending life, and now so generously helping others, you are simply the second sun that always shines in the sky. Just like your name, your brilliance will illuminate the entire transient sea. Almighty Right. Generous Right. Light of the Treasure Island. Chen Guang's face was about to burst from smiling. He hadn't even started work yet, but the 1,000 to 2,000 people below were already sending letters of admiration. What innocent and adorable people, what pure faith, I really love you guys to death, my honest little friends. However, I can't let everyone come here for nothing. Bob, Boldev, find a few more people and break down the wall for me. I want to play the song Blue Danube River. Chen Guang shook his windbreaker, turned around, and walked back. Boldev. Go. Bob shrunk back, you are an undead rank expert, my old arms and legs can't handle it. Bang! The mud wall beside the piano was smashed by Boldev's iron fist, revealing the piano inside. Half of Bob's body was thrown to the side of the piano. Boldev, you idiot. Be gentle. Don't hurt this noble piano. This is a divine artifact that Mr. Right touched before. Chen Guang and Boldev looked at Bob, simultaneously having the urge to strangle him to death. A song Blue Danube River, dedicated to everyone. The forever noisy slum district had never experienced such a moment of peace. Although the sound was faint, it resounded through every corner of the street. Even Gale, who had a high status as the vice-captain of the guards, was sitting cross-legged on the street floor like a beggar. At this moment, regardless of whether it was an undead rank expert, a homeless person with tattered clothes, or a noble from middle continent, they were all so quiet and serene. As the notes surged, a sparkling river slowly flowed through everyone's heart. They recalled the innocence of their childhood and lamented the impermanence of life. 10 minutes later, Chen Guang stood up from the piano and lightly bowed to the audience. After a moment of silence, the crowd burst into thunderous cheers. A white mist with more than 2,000 faith points emerged in everyone's mind. The lady boss of Bloody Mary Bar, Mary, even gave Chen Guang close to 5 points of faith. Her bar often invited wandering poets, and she clearly understood how great Chen Guang was. From this moment on, the name of the Light of Treasure Island, right, resounded throughout the island, accompanied by the sails and swords of the pirates, spreading to every corner of the Sea of Time. 15 days later, the renovated Wright's Bar reopened. In fact, Chen Guang only spent 300,000 gold berries and 3,000 faith points to obtain the ownership of Wright's Bar. In the beginning, Bob suggested moving the bar to the center of the city, but Chen Guang rejected that foolish suggestion. Don't look down on Purple Rose's port just because it wasn't a great place, but it was a medium-sized plaza that could accommodate 2,000 people. On the treasure island with a diameter of only 10 kilometers, it was not an exaggeration to say that every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. Walking through the entire treasure island, one would not be able to find a bigger square than the Purple Roses Street. What Chen Guang cared about was not the lowliness and nobility of the audience, he even hoped that his audience were all poor people. In this sea of time where the weak are prey to the strong, the lower the weak, the more they desire to obtain stronger power, and the more they are willing to sell their souls for strength. It was much easier to get these people to give faith points than to get those rich nobles to submit. What he wanted was the number of people in the audience. The reason why he wanted to break that wall was because Chen Guang wanted more people outside to hear his performance. This was a legendary afternoon. A total of 30 Guqin songs, including City in the Sky, Walk in the Rain, Wild Bee Dance, Mark of the Rain, Pathétique, and other famous songs with different styles, gave thousands of listeners inside and outside Wright's Bar a godlike experience. In the long history of the Sea of Moments, there had never been a wandering bard like Chen Guang, playing for 4 hours in one go. Furthermore, every piece was different, and they had never heard of any of them before. But they were all so perfect and pleasant to the ear. Boldev was even more excited and trembling. As an audience of Chen Guang's last 4-hour concert, he can be 100% sure that the song played by Mr. Wright this time is completely different from the last time. In this afternoon, 4 undead rank powerhouses sitting in Wright's Bar advanced hockey. Among the thousands of listeners outside, 3 or 4 people comprehended observation hockey on the spot. Chen Guang used this public concert to conquer the entire Treasure Island, becoming the veritable Light of Treasure Island. Sir, there are a total of 139 girls registered here, eager to get your favor. I have used the aesthetic standards I learned from you to conduct a preliminary selection of them, leaving only 8 real beauties. Do you think I should let them come over? Chen Guang was overjoyed. Old Bob, am I a shoemaker? After a while, Chen Guang asked. Old Bob was at a loss. No, you are a bard. But I don't remember teaching you how to choose a shoemaker. Are you blind? Is this my aesthetic standard? Did you learn the aesthetic standard of my feet? Chen Guang sent that fellow flying with a kick. Chapter 499. From the day of its birth, Wright's Bar was destined to be extraordinary. This should be the first bar on Treasure Island founded by a bard, or perhaps the first bar in the entire Sea of Time. In the long history of the Sea of Time, few bards were willing to stay in the same place for a long time. For anyone living in the sea, the sea symbolizes freedom, symbolizes inexhaustible inspiration and wealth. Every person in this world with a dream is eager to conquer the sea. In ancient times, Poseidon, the overlord of the 5 seas, Magellan, the overlord of the Central Sea in the Middle Ages, and Gol Roger, the overlord of the East Sea in modern times. Every legendary hero sprinkled their legends in every inch of the sea. Even if they have disappeared, their stories are still remembered by the world. Even now, 10,000 years have passed, Magellan's statue still stands in the legendary garden in the center of Treasure Island. One after another, young pirates chasing their dreams devoutly pray in front of the statue, and will set foot on the boundless sea with Magellan's guidance. Freedom is glory. Conquer and forge glory. This is the eternal theme of the Sea of Time. More than other professions, bard is even more unrestrained. Staying in the same place for a long time, when everything around you begins to become familiar, it will be difficult for bard to find a source of inspiration in life. Only through endless exploration and adventure can one constantly obtain inspiration from the sea, and only then can one become stronger and stronger. One must become stronger in order to obtain an immortal soul. This was the case for pirates who practiced hockey, the same was true for mages who practiced magic and witchcraft, and the same was true for bards who practiced music and creation as their soul. Even a musician as strong as one of the 12 ocean emperors, Brooke, chose to take his own fleet to endlessly shuttle through the entire sea, adventuring on one mysterious floating island after another, challenging undefeatable sea beasts, and searching for treasures hidden in the depths of the sea by predecessors. Ordinary strong people pursue immortality, and immortal strong people pursue eternity. The longer they live, the more they fear that one day they will not be able to be reborn after death. Even the undefeated Gol Roger was submerged in the waves of history, not to mention the fact that none of the 12 ocean emperors alive today can compare to Gol Roger's hegemony. Chen Guang regarded himself as a resident artist in the bar, which was normal for him. But to the pirates of Treasure Island and even the Sea of Moments, they interpreted Chen Guang's actions as great. He gave up on immortality, gave up on becoming stronger, and used his music to cleanse the hearts of others selflessly. His generosity and greatness didn't need to be sung, it would accompany the ceaseless flow of the seawater and sprinkle over every corner of the Sea of Moments. Then again, the reason why Chen Guang's fame rose was because of the world-famous songs that he had stuffed into his brain back in the world of the piano. No matter how hard a poor bard played, it would only be annoying noise. But Mr. Wright was different. Every one of his songs was so beautiful, well-tempered, and flawless. He is the best piano player in history. First, his musical attainment basically stopped at the level of a player. He could only play, not create. It was impossible for him to casually create a beautiful melody on the spot like Beethoven and Mozart. Secondly, his performance was not only accurate, it was not machine-like, but it was better than machine-like. In terms of intonation, perhaps only the intonation of the original composer when he played the whole song for the first time could be exactly the same as his level of cheating through the world in a cup. Third, as a player with a large capacity that would never crash, his storage was abnormal. As long as it was recorded in human history, there was no song that he didn't know, and there was no song that he didn't know. If you asked him to recite the names of the songs one by one, perhaps he wouldn't be able to remember them, but if you asked him to play it, he would have it at his fingertips. The notes and melody didn't need to be memorized at all. It had become an instinct that was engraved in his genes. How much change could a bar bring to the entire Treasure Island? Before Chen Guang appeared, no one would consider this question. However, a year later, when someone suddenly looked back, they realized that the layout of the entire Treasure Island had unknowingly changed. Although Treasure Island was a circulation island famous for trading, most of the pirate forces or representatives of the aristocratic families of Middle-earth who were in power on the island lived in the central area of the floating island. Starting from the wealthy area and the aristocratic area in the center, It was the large trading area, the slum area, the flea market area, and even the dock area for unloading and loading goods. Wright's bar was located at the intersection of the slum area and the flea market area on the west side of the island. In this short period of a year, whether it was the representatives of the aristocrats or the people in charge of the pirate forces, they had unknowingly moved their residences near Wright's bar. In particular, the two small buildings near Wright's bar had been inflated to sky-high prices. One of them was bought by a representative of the top 50-strong forces in the Sea of Moments, and the other was bought by the son of a duke in Middle-earth. It was said that the duke had already set off for Treasure Island and would arrive in 2 years. This meant that Wright's bar had forcibly changed the urban structure of Treasure Island, turning this West City district into a wealthy area. Regarding this change, although Chen Guang was not very willing, it did not affect him too much, so he just let it be. During this year, he did not even take the initiative to recruit anyone, but his Wright's bar grew rapidly and irresistibly. After the first month, his bar was guarded by 3 undying rank powerhouses, including Boldev, and no one tried to make trouble in his bar. Boldev became his first undying rank follower. A year later, the undying rank powerhouse who had only mastered observation hockey could only work as a waiter in his bar. There was once a pirate leader who boasted of being one of the top 100 pirate groups in the Sea of Moments and tried to kidnap Chen Guang. As a result, before he could get close, he was knocked down to the ground by an undying rank powerhouse wearing a modern bar security uniform designed by Chen Guang according to his memory and sent him to reincarnation. In addition, there were no less than 10 bards who were highly respected in the outside world who came to his bar to be apprentices. Chen Guang did not have much music theory to teach, so he simply taught this group of people how to use a staff and then gave each of them a piece of music score. Now, of these 10 bards, 3 were part-time bartenders, 3 were helping to cut vegetables in the kitchen, and the other 4 who learned better were allowed to play on stage when Chen Guang was lazy and spread the glory of their mentor, Mr. Wright. About 11 months ago, Chen Guang had found a way to find someone to send out a message. There were 2 letters, one to Annie and the other to Ling Qin. However, the Sea of Moments was too big, and now that a year had passed, he did not know if the 2 had received it. Old Bob's beauty contest plan had never stopped, but his aesthetic sense seemed to be incurable. Chen Guang also had a crooked idea at first. Since old Bob could not be counted on, he planned to find some sweetness himself. Although there were almost only blonde European girls on Treasure Island, it was not that there was no one who met his aesthetic sense, and the other party seemed to be very interested. Finally, he was about to succeed. However, just as he gritted his teeth and was about to go into battle, because he was too excited, he tripped on his feet and could not step on the bed. Instead, he slipped and fell to the ground. At that time, it was not easy for him to carefully select and search the entire Treasure Island for girls of the right age. Finally, he found a pure virgin girl whose appearance met his aesthetic standards. She climbed down from the bed in a panic and was about to help him onto the bed, but in the end, she saw the shocking hole on the iron floor. The size and thickness of the hole were exactly the same as his mortal weapon. Coupled with the flying sawdust that resembled a disaster scene, Bob, who was eating mashed potatoes downstairs, cursed through the circular hole. "Who's so wicked to make a hole upstairs?" Next to him, Boldev reminded, "Little Bob, above you is Mr. Wright's bedroom." A short and suppressed cry of alarm came from downstairs, and then there was the sound of someone running away in a hurry. The 18-year-old girl first looked at the hole, then looked at Chen Guang, and in an instant understood everything. She then covered her mouth and cried bitterly, "Mr. Wright, please let me go. I don't want to die." Chen Guang sighed and admitted defeat. Being too strong is really a kind of trouble. He actually wanted to explain to the girl that although the scene she saw was terrible, she was soft and the board was hard. As long as he controlled it well, no one would die. But the girl cried so miserably that he felt as if he had really committed a big crime, so he simply let her go. Little did he know that this was releasing a tiger back to the mountain. After one night, Mr. Wright's fearsomeness in one respect spread as rapidly as his talent spread throughout Treasure Island, and then throughout the Sea of Moments. If you don't have the strength of an undead, don't try to challenge Mr. Wright in bed. Even if you are a man. He can even break swords. He can even split seawater. I heard that Wright's bar lacked a hammer when it was renovated. It was Mr. Wright who personally made the stage. Don't ask me how he knocked the nail in. Without armament hockey, it will be easily smashed by him. Except for the strong with Haushiku hockey, no one can survive under Mr. Wright's whip. Are you talking about Annie? Don't talk nonsense. People will die. Rumors are so terrible that in the Sea of Time where all the information is passed on by word of mouth or by letter, Chen Guang didn't even have a chance to hold a press conference to clarify. Later, the girl who was let go even ran back and knelt down to apologize. She said that she didn't add anything to the outside world and just slightly disclosed the matter to her best friend. For this kind of thing, I only told you this, you must not pass it on to others. As a result, the next day it was known to the world. Chen Guang has long been numb. He didn't blame the girl much and he just accepted his bad luck. Although his brother is now famous and he is known as the Light of Treasure Island, after all, he is a good man who is not willing to force others. Yes, this is called not forgetting the original intention. Isn't it just a woman with Haushiku hockey? Annie, come on. So, in such a hoarse wailing waiting, he has been in the Sea of Time for a year. Today may be just an ordinary day for others, but for Chen Guang, it is particularly memorable. Because, from today onwards, his second business, Wright Divination House, can finally open. He had been busy for an entire year, insisting on performing on stage for 4 hours every day, constantly spreading his fame. With Treasure Island as his foundation, he had dominated the middle sea of Transient Sea's music industry. He had constantly instilled the concept that he was the best, that he was the strongest wandering bard. Finally, a year later, he had collected 16.6 million faith points. He locked himself in the office, first took a bath, fasted, and prayed, then began to work on the light screen. Come on. I want the devil juicer. Come on. I want the divination bowl. Looking at the two things in front of him, he was a little confused. Then the question is, why does the devil juice juicer, a specialty of the Sea of Time, look so familiar? It even came with a packaging. There is even an advertising slogan on the packaging. 9 Suns Juicer, fresh every drop. Damn it. Also, the divination ball in my memory isn't like this, it should be a crystal ball the size of a palm. Why is there a monocular in front of me? There is also a packaging. Be careful. Damn it to the quadratic power. Just as he was in a daze, Bob pushed open the door and entered, Mr. Wright. Not good. Brooks' fleet is on the way to Treasure Island, and will arrive tomorrow. I heard that he is here to challenge you. He has a lot of opinions about you, often proclaiming that you are the #1 bard of the Sea of Time. Chen Guang slapped the seat and stood up, damn it to the quadratic power. The bard Wright's boastful words somehow reached the ears of the musician Brooke. In fact, Chen Guang already knew that his arrogance was likely to arouse the dissatisfaction of some of his peers, but after personally listening to his music, most of the bards near Treasure Island chose to worship him on the spot, a small number chose to set sail, and most of them chose to stay on Treasure Island and become his fans after being rejected on the spot. Perhaps later on, the super strong bard standing at the top of the Sea of Time would dare to challenge His Majesty. The musician Brooke is one of the best. Mr. Wright, do we need to run? Old Bob asked. Chen Guang stared, why should we run? If he wants to challenge me, then come. Do you think I will lose? Bob was shocked. Mr. Wright, can you win? Bob, do you know what I admire most about you? Chen Guang restrained his anger and said with a fake smile. Bob said without hesitation, Sir, you must think that I am smart and can always solve problems for you. Chen Guang shook his head. No, no, no. If I met a pig when I first came to Treasure Island, then the current deputy general manager of Wright's Bar would be a pig. Oh, sir, it really hurts me to say that, but I am still your most loyal servant. Old Bob turned around and walked out, carrying a big bag on his back. It turned out that this guy had already packed up his belongings before coming in to inform Brooke. Bob, you're back. Chen Guang waved. Leave your bag with me, then go out and prepare to spread the news. Tell others that I, Wright, accept Brooke's challenge. Bob made a bitter face. Sir, this is just the clothes I just ordered for you. Chen Guang said, your clothes can emit golden light. Chapter 500. After driving away the idiot Bob, Chen Guang was alone in the room, carefully checking his faith value. He had been running the right bar for a whole year. In the beginning, his faith value skyrocketed. Almost every day after his performance, his faith value would increase by 1,000 to 3,000 points. But now, a whole year had passed. Although there were people coming and going on Treasure Island, and there were people arriving and leaving every day, the growth of his faith value had inevitably stagnated. Just by listening to the pirates who had listened to his performance, others would forget it after hearing it. It was difficult to gain unforgettable recognition and generate new faith value. Therefore, he felt that he now lacked an effective way to spread his music. He only hated himself for not being a technological geek, otherwise he would have developed a phonograph to make records. Unfortunately, he studied environmental protection, and was engaged in water pollution control. This world is full of fresh water, and it has a little jasmine tea taste, okay? My ass. Otherwise, how cool would it be to be a technological geek in my own world and engage in technological advancement? In the eyes of Bob and others, Brooke's challenge may be a crisis, but in Chen Guang's heart, he didn't think so at all. This was a great opportunity for him. If he could openly defeat Brooke in an open challenge, he would be able to convince the super musicians who had been recognized by the entire Sea of Time. Then, before a new genius appeared, he would undoubtedly become the #1 bard of the Sea of Time in everyone's hearts. Those who had only heard of his name, but had never seen his skills, might be able to send him a little faith value. As for how to challenge his piano skills, Chen Guang, who had been a pianist for countless years with the identity of 1900, said that there was no pressure. Therefore, tomorrow, he would first subdue Brooke, and then the current production of nearly 600,000 faith value per day should rise, right? If the business of the divination house was good, perhaps it would only take a few days to complete the learning of 4,978 languages. Wait a minute. Chen Guang suddenly realized something. What he had to face was not only the common English, French, German, Japanese, Korean, and Spanish on Earth, but also the various indigenous languages that were about to be lost. At least in the case of Treasure Island, where he was now, he had asked old Bob to do a census of the people who came and went. So far, there were hundreds of pirates who had appeared on Treasure Island, and perhaps there were more than 100 corresponding languages. However, the official language of the instantaneous sea was still English. At first, it was very easy and pleasant for him to keep learning new languages, but gradually, as the languages he needed to learn became more and more obscure, it was very likely that he would not be able to find anyone who knew these obscure languages even if he had demon juice. Although the population of the Sea of Time was as high as 178 billion, as long as one's efforts paid off, coupled with the divination ball's search function, they should be able to find people. But the Sea of Moments was too big. Even if they knew where he was, they might have to wait for many years to bring him over. Tens of millions of kilometers in a minute, okay? For example, if some unlucky race with a rare language was living on a certain floating island near the border of the Sea of Moments, how were they supposed to bring them over? Although most of the population of the Sea of Moments was concentrated in the 5 seas, everyone knew that the seas outside the 5 seas were the most mysterious and boundless. For example, the Wampy Sea of Gorja Roger, it seemed like no one could find it now. Chen Guang expressed that he was starting to panic. He felt that the setting of the Heavenly Holy Grail was very unreasonable, it was simply a scam. "Lori! Come out and save me!" Chen Guang shouted in his heart. Luli cursed in her heart unhappily, "What? I'm busy. You should know what I was thinking just now, right? Give me an idea. I'm now locked up in Treasure Island and can't move. What if some remote Hebrew language is on the side of the cup?" Chen Guang said anxiously. Lori chuckled, "Don't worry, when your daily production of faith reaches 100 billion a day, you will find some surprises. Let me give you a small tip, you can't leave Treasure Island, but isn't Treasure Island a floating island?" Chen Guang instantly understood, "You mean, I can pay the faith points to drag Treasure Island away?" Lori nodded, "That's about it." "Why is it 100 billion a day? That's F***king expensive. Our price system is collapsing so badly." Chen Guang protested, "If the Heavenly Holy Grail is a game developer, with the price system collapsing like this, it would become a ghost in 3 days. Lori chuckled, "You can understand it this way, the game developer's concept is very good. But you neglected one thing, the Heavenly Holy Grail is a single-player game, you are the only player, the entire game, the entire world, is to serve you. To be more accurate, including the realm of Transient Sea, all the test worlds exist to train you. Even if the Transient Sea has already become its own world and self-proclaimed system, when you enter, the Heavenly Holy Grail will still make slight adjustments to certain things under the precondition that the realm of Transient Sea is stable, to ensure that your training and tests are in line with the Heavenly Holy Grail's original intentions. This way, don't you feel that you have a special sense of existence, that you are especially respected? Otherwise, how can there be such an easy thing in this world, that you can get something without paying?" Chen Guang fiercely slammed the table, "Your family's slight adjustments go from tens of thousands to hundreds of billions. Which idiot designed this Heavenly Holy Grail? Is there a hole in his brain? Such an indecent endless god world's 10 great god equipment, it's simply degrading." Lori, hee, well scolded. "I really want to curse that bastard to death." Chen Guang laid on the chair and pretended to be a zombie. Seeing his face that was filled with nothing to live for, truly pitiful, Lori showed a rare kindness. "All right, don't complain, there are some words that I don't want to say to you too clearly, but you have to understand it yourself. Letting you stay in the Transient Sea for a long time is something that the Heavenly Holy Grail deduced after precise calculations that it must do. Don't you feel that, as the wielder of a supreme god equipment, as the savior of this empress, your temperament is too weak? Letting you experience the various states of the world here, experiencing life, this is the Holy Grail's test for you, and also a form of nurturing. In the past, it would seal your heart every time, making you waste away your time. This time, when you return to the Transient Sea, it is a chance for you to transform yourself, to be reborn." Chen Guang waved his hand helplessly, "I understand the logic, but this matter is too deliberate, it's very stupid, all right? Not letting you stay for 62,000 years is already a great kindness, accept your fate, don't look for me for help, because this is something that even I can't decide. Remember, in your long life, how to see through the mysteries without forgetting your original intention, this is especially important for you. You have to understand, the Transient Sea is only one of the 3,000 worlds. Right now you are only facing the test of the one line of heavens, the days are still long." Chen Guang didn't want to talk to Lori anymore, and threw a lump of snot at her. Outside, there was also a fellow who had nothing to live for. Seeing Bob come out with a bitter face, Buldev came over and asked, "Little Bob, what is Mr. Wright's attitude? Are we going to start a war with Mr. Brooke?" "I have just talked with many experts on the island, although everyone is willing to pledge their lives to follow Sir, but even if we join forces, we still can't resist Sir Brooke. The power of the Sea Emperor is too strong, it's not something we can imagine." Bob glanced at Buldev, he stared affectionately at this bearded brother. After a long time, he softly said, "Buldev, after I die, can I be buried together with you?" Buldev stared at him. Has the situation become so serious? Bob shook his head. "Oh no, I was just thinking, if I can stay in the same grave as the immortal strong, maybe when you resurrect, you will remember to take my soul with you, so that we will be twin brothers in our next life. At that time, you must remember to let our parents name me Bob, and tell me the story of my life from an early age." "Buldev, I am very reluctant to part with you. If possible, please don't let my soul dissipate like dew in the morning under the sun." "Buldev, well, if you also have a soul, I will try my best, but it is also possible that we will be twins." "Bob, it is also possible that we will be deformed with two heads, so that we can learn the cannibal magic that requires two heads to chant at the same time." The Light of Treasure Island, Wright, had announced that he had accepted the musician Brooke's challenge. This earth-shattering news swept through the entire Treasure Island in a flash. Under the feet of the seagulls and geese, it quickly spread to every corner of the Central Sea. This incident happened so suddenly that it caught everyone off guard. A year ago, Sir Brooke was still on the periphery of the South Sea looking for the location of the Sea of Music and Murek Sea. No one knew what kind of powerful magic he used to make his ship cross nearly 10 million kilometers in just 1 year to arrive at Treasure Island. In the understanding of many people, even at this time, Brooke should not have heard of the name of Wright. Chen Guang himself was also pondering over this matter. He felt that perhaps Brooke had some means of spreading information that he did not know of. Silver Sparrow sighting. Since the other side issued the challenge first, of course, he had to add some stakes to make it interesting, otherwise, he would be putting himself too low. On his side, he intended to write 10 pieces of music as stakes. As for Brooke, Chen Guang's territory could be considered, so he first put out the music pieces and let the other side see the dish on the plate. After all, for Chen Guang, the music pieces were worthless, but for the genuine bard Brooke, who pursued the highest realm of art, it was a priceless treasure. This is called cross-border business, or smuggling for short. Huge profits need not be explained. At this time, above the distant East Sea, Brooke put down the colorful shell in his hand and fell into contemplation. After a long time, this skinny as a match, wearing a huge curly-brimmed hat, the #1 bard of the Sea of Time sighed softly, but did not speak. Next to him, a young man dressed in aristocratic clothing slightly bowed. "Sir Brooke, this subordinate thinks that, with your status, challenging a bard who has just become famous for less than a year, it is detrimental to your dignity. I think his wording is inappropriate, and he has the intention of humiliating you." Brooke turned his head to look at the young man. "Watson, you don't understand. A bard is different from an ordinary pirate who cultivates hockey. The higher a bard stands, the less he can see the direction of the future, unable to find the goal of cultivation. I have been stuck in this realm for 2,000 years, dying and coming back to life again and again, causing my memory to gradually blur. If I can't go further, perhaps the next time I sleep, I will disappear forever." Watson's mood became agitated. "No. Impossible. Mr. Brooke, you are the greatest bard. How could you disappear?" Brooke was somewhat disappointed and frustrated. "Young Watson, do you know who my captain is?" "What?" "Sir Brooke, you also have a captain." It was obviously the first time that Watson heard this secret. Brooke nodded. "Yes, my captain is the only great overlord of the sea who has defeated the central government. He is the only pirate king recognized by everyone after Gol Roger. His name is Luffy. What? Sir Brooke, you are actually a crew member of that ship. Watson has been following Brooke for 1,000 years, but it was the first time that he heard him talk about the past. Yes, we found the Wampy Sea together with the Shawnee. We have the world's greatest pirate king, the greatest swordsman, the greatest chef, the greatest navigator, the greatest archaeologist, the greatest doctor, the greatest mechanic, and the stupidest sniper. We have done things that others can never imagine. When we found Gol Roger's treasure, my companions chose to drive the Shawnee deeper into the endless sea. My captain wanted to see the end of the Sea of Time. I was going to go too, but they told me to stay. They knew that they probably wouldn't come back. They thought that I should leave my talent in the 5 seas and use my music to create more excellent pirates for this world. Watson slammed the table. He was going crazy, my God. Gol Roger's treasure. Mr. Brooke, I really didn't think that you. What kind of treasure is that? That's a letter, nothing else. Brooke's tone became deep. What did the letter say? Watson's breathing almost stopped. The atmosphere in the cabin became incomparably heavy in an instant. Brooke raised his head slightly and looked at the window, as if he was afraid that the wall had ears. The letter said that the owner of the Eternal Hand is alive. The legend of the Eternal Hand and the invisible wall at the end of the Sea of Time has been circulating in this world for far too many years, so long that if it wasn't mentioned, it would be almost forgotten. But with just a little bit of information, everyone in the Sea of Time knows about it. This is the most basic common sense, just like how there are 24 hours in a day. After the day passes, it is night. Brooke's simple words revealed an infinite amount of information. Since the owner of the Eternal Hand is alive, it means that the entire Sea of Time is simply a cage. The entire world isn't even as big as his hand. We are just playthings in other people's hands. Just by imagining this scene in his mind, he could understand how depressed and painful Gol Roger, who had already stood at the top of the world, was when he discovered this secret. This is the biggest secret of the Sea of Time. In order to find this secret, Gol Roger spent 10,000 years of his life. In hundreds of reincarnations, he traveled through the 5 seas, went through countless difficulties and dangers, went deep into the sea, defeated one sea emperor-level monster after another, explored one mysterious ruin after another, tore open the deep sea with his formidable strength, went down to the bottom of the sea, and communicated with the merfolk on those huge seabed continents that made people despair. He walked step by step on the footprints left by the great sages like Poseidon and Magellan, and then used his unparalleled knowledge and wisdom to decipher the mystery and deduce this conclusion that he didn't dare to believe but had no choice but to believe. Discovering this secret turned the great overlord of the sea into a decadent old man. He didn't even dare to say it. He didn't dare to let his crew know even the slightest bit. He only dared to write it in a letter and bury it in the deep sea. Even if he lost the love and respect of his crew, he didn't care. Because he knew that if he simply said it, it would only make people think that he was a stupid madman. Therefore, before he died, he told a big lie, telling people that his treasure was hidden in the Sea of 10,000 Peaks, making the younger generation crazy, and setting off the great pirate era. Only treasures obtained after risking everything will be cherished, only this kind of words will be believed. In the end, Gol Roger suddenly lost the right to be immortal because he had almost seen through the true secrets of the realm of the transient sea. He even wanted to reveal the secrets to the public, so he was punished by the realm of the transient sea and his immortal soul was taken away. No, impossible. Even if these words came from the mouth of his most respected Mr. Brooke, Watson still felt it was hard to believe. Brooke smiled. See, even if I say it, Watson, you still doubt it. We were also like this. Even if this letter was left by Mr. Gol Roger, it still made us lose our minds for many years. So Captain Luffy and the others chose to continue to the deep sea. Even if they knew they couldn't come back. Just to see the hand of eternity. It took Watson 15 minutes to calm down a little, and asked again. Brooke nodded, yes. Therefore, I must challenge right. I have waited for such an opponent for thousands of years, and I can't hold on any longer. The best result is that I can break through the shackles of the present in the fight with him, and become the strongest bard that has never appeared in the entire history of the Sea of Time. The worst result may be nothing, then I will choose to pass on Roger's letter and my everything to him, hoping that after I die, he can pass on this secret and cultivate a powerful pirate king that surpasses Luffy, surpasses Roger, surpasses Magellan, surpasses Poseidon, and breaks this endless cage. Let us obtain true freedom. Mr. Brooke, Watson, who has a lifespan of 1,300 years in a young body, cried like a child. At this time, Brooke and Watson didn't know that the owner of the Hand of Eternity was waiting for him on Treasure Island, and with a face full of expectation, he was shaking the 10 pieces of music he had just written in his hand, wanting to obtain the means to transmit the message, the sound transmission shell that he had just used to communicate with others. Chapter 501. In the early morning, Treasure Island was filled with coolness, and the white fog shrouded the entire island. Many people had already come out of their rooms in advance and arrived at the Western District, occupying the advantageous terrain early on. There was no scramble for seats. Everyone knew that if one's status and strength did not reach a certain level, one would not have the face to enter Wright's Bar and sit down. A year had passed, and Wright's Bar had already become one of the most famous landmarks on Treasure Island and even in the entire Central Sea region. Being able to walk in, find a corner to sit down, and order a glass of wine that was not expensive was a symbol of status and value. If it were not for the sufficiently spacious street outside the bar, perhaps the poor people would not have the opportunity to listen to the divine music at all. It was said that the bar manager, Janet, had planned to purchase a nearby block and turn the entire large area into a grand theater. She almost succeeded. Most of the houses near the street corner were purchased by her under Mr. Wright's name, but in the end, the theater wasn't built. Instead, most of the buildings were flattened and turned into a medium-sized square that could accommodate 10,000 people. It was said that this was Mr. Wright's intention. At that time, his original words were as follows: music and art, regardless of high or low, regardless of high or low, music performed in a cage-like theater has no soul. Only unrestrained music can obtain eternity in the sea breeze. Therefore, on the bustling trading island of Treasure Island, the newly built Wright Square had become the most unique scenery. Every day from 1 to 5:00 in the afternoon, the huge square would become completely silent, and only the ethereal and gorgeous music would resound throughout the square. However, even if such a huge square had been expanded, it would still be full of people when Chinguang played every day without exception. Usually, it was extremely difficult to find a seat in the square, let alone today. People put on their best clothes and went out early. The sun had only risen halfway, but the huge square was already crowded with people. Not only that, but the streets further away were also crowded with people who had nowhere to go. The street vendors were much more diligent than usual, shouting and selling goods and breakfast that had been rushed through the night last night. Even the 4 trading halls on Treasure Island that never closed for business had chosen to close for the day. This was because none of the natives of Treasure Island who worked in the trading hall were willing to work at all. All of them had applied for leave to go to Wright Square. A festive atmosphere filled Treasure Island. In just one night, the resident population of Treasure Island, which was about 600,000 to 700,000, doubled. Everyone who could arrive within one day tried their best to come from all over the Central Sea region. It was rumored that the leaders of the Central Sea, in order to arrive within one day, had even used powerful black magic to arrive within one day. At this time, it was said that they would arrive before noon. In addition to the 3 captains who were originally on Treasure Island, among the top 100 pirate forces in the Sea of Moments, 7 more had rushed over overnight, and the leaders of 8 other forces were on the way. Without exception, in order to rush over as quickly as possible, they had all paid a heavy price, just to witness with their own eyes the contest between Musician Brook, one of the 12 Sea Emperors, and Wright. The competition between bards was actually not uncommon. Unlike the fierce competition between pirates, the competition between bards was mainly focused on performance skills or poetry creation. Basically, no lives would be lost in the competition. On the contrary, they could gain new insights through mutual exchanges and collisions. This was also one of the ways that bards in the transient sea who were close in level to improve themselves. It was just that from the very beginning, when Qinguang appeared on Treasure Island, he appeared to be too strong, so much so that no matter how envious, jealous, or hateful they were, they dared not challenge him lightly. On the contrary, most of them came to learn from him. Originally, these people did not have any hope of becoming his disciple. After all, there had never been a bard who was generous enough to pass on his skills. Moreover, how could the bard's skills be passed on? Even if they remembered the sequence of all the keys, they could not remember the rhythm between each note. It was not until 10 of them had successfully become Qinguang's disciples that they saw a musical score for the first time. At that time, Qinguang also expressed his astonishment. He had a dumbfounded look on his face and was puzzled. The transient sea had tens of thousands of years of history, so why couldn't they even invent a musical score? But later on, he also understood that in a sense, before he came here for the first time, the entire transient sea did not exist. Its previous history was a fictional reality created by the Cup Realm when it created the world. To Qinguang, the history of the transient sea was fictional, but to the people of the transient sea, it was real. It was actually very simple to explain why they did not have a musical score. It was because Qinguang did not understand this thing at all. He did not have this concept in his mind at all. He had forgotten about it when the heavenly Holy Grail was creating the world. Sometimes, being carefree was a very happy thing. At this time, no matter how excited the people outside were, Qinguang himself was sleeping soundly. After making the first cup of devil juice last night, he did not stay idle. He spent the whole night training 2 of his 10 disciples, Shauna and Celine. The scene at that time was like this. "Teacher, why can't I wear clothes when I play the piano?" "You can wear clothes when you play outside, but when you study with me, every inch of your skin must be exposed to the air. This way, every pore of your body is breathing, and you will be able to experience the artistic aura emitted by your teacher's body." "Yes, teacher, but why do David and the others wear clothes when studying with you?" "Because their realm is too low, so they temporarily cannot experience my precious artistic aura." "Shauna, when you play, spread your legs a little wider, use your strength to breathe, use your heart to feel, that's right, that's it." "Teacher, your pants are torn." "It's okay, I also need to breathe." "Teacher, the piano collapsed." "It's okay, buy a new one tomorrow." Crack. "Teacher, my elbow is broken." This time, something happened. After a moment of chaos, Qinguang and Celine carried the accidentally injured Shauna back to the room. Qinguang said, "Actually, when I was teaching, I accidentally touched her elbow. I really didn't mean it." If he had a choice, he would rather all of his disciples be beauties. Unfortunately, his heart was higher than the sky, and his life was thinner than paper. After so many choices, he could only find these 2 girls. Shauna's appearance was pure, and she was 70 to 80% similar to the Hollywood star Emma Watson in his memory. Celine was more charming, and she looked very much like Scarlett Johansson. As for how talented these 2 were in the piano, Qinguang said that he had no idea. His own music theory was zero, so he had no right to evaluate other people's talent. The reason he chose them as his disciples was very simple. Appearance was justice. As for the other 8 male disciples, Chen Guang felt that he could not only accept female disciples, otherwise it would be too obvious and damage his image. Therefore, after eliminating more than 90% of the people who came to learn from him, he kept these 8 men. There were 2 reasons for choosing them. First, they were to make up the numbers, and second, they were ugly enough. If the world knew that Mr. Wright's standards for accepting disciples were like this, who knew how many of his fans would have their dreams shattered? Of course, as a modern person with a thick skin, Chen Guang definitely could not let people find out that there was something fishy about him. You are the disciples that I have chosen. 1 in 10,000. If you can inherit even a 10,000th of my talent, you will become the legends of the Sea of Moments. Do you remember? This is the staff. This is the greatest treasure I have left for the Sea of Moments. From today onwards, the bards of the Sea of Moments will completely change their current situation of thinking alone. Instead, they will be able to record their own inspiration using the staff and pass it down. When Chen Guang accepted disciples, he said this to the 10 people below the stage who were looking at him with admiration. I am satisfied with your talent, but you must remember, only those with the most sincere hearts can become the greatest bards. Therefore, I absolutely forbid the love between apprentices. Once discovered, they will be expelled immediately. The 10 people looked at him with even more admiration. If you want to understand the true meaning of art through love, you can only love me. The eyes of the 10 people seemed to have stars. What a great teacher. Don't look at me like that. In my hometown, same-sex love is not accepted. Finally, when the noon bell rang, a huge ship hanging a huge pirate flag suddenly appeared outside the port of Treasure Island. Brooke had arrived. The people who had been waiting here for a long time cheered in unison. The reputation that Brooke had accumulated for many years was not an undeserved reputation. Unlike Chen Guang, who rose rapidly like a comet, Brooke had used his dedication day after day, year after year, to win the respect of every pirate in the Sea of Moments. His strength was tyrannical, yet he was humble, courteous, and generous. Even the royal family of the Central Earth government, who had arrived earlier than Brooke, chose to stay at the port and wait for Brooke's arrival. Chen Guang originally didn't intend to come, but he really couldn't resist Bob's tearful pleading. Mr. Wright, I'm begging you, go take a look, even if it's to show a little bit of basic respect, so that if we lose. No, of course we won't lose. You are the most powerful bard. Brooke crossed 2 seas to listen to your teachings, and the great you took the initiative to go to the port to welcome him. Regardless of victory or defeat, this will surely become a legend. Sir, think about it. Tens of thousands of years later, there will be such a story circulating in the Sea of Moments. It was a sunny noon, and the greatest bard in history, Mr. Wright, and the second greatest bard, Lord Brooke, met for the first time on Treasure Island, opening a new chapter in the history of the Sea of Moments. How about it? Don't you feel excited just thinking about it? Although today's Bob was no longer the destitute intelligence merchant of the past, and was also a respected figure on the island, his eloquence hadn't fallen, and his flattery had become even more exquisite. Chen Guang was also pleased with the flattery. There's still a bit of truth to it, let's go. But when he really stood at the forefront of the port, looking at the huge pirate ship that was more than 10 feet tall, not inferior to the Titanic cruise ship, he still received a great shock. What shocked him wasn't the size of the ship, but the very familiar pirate flag on it. The skull on the flag made his consciousness pass through the barrier of the plane in an instant. It was as if he had returned to the time when he was still a primary school student, squatting at home with Zhu Jifa and a group of people. They were filled with anticipation as they inserted the CDs they rented from the video store into the VCD player of Bobigeo. It was a scorching hot summer, and a dozen of his friends squeezed together in a room without air conditioning. Although they were sweating profusely from the heat, their eyes were shining as they watched the TV, unwilling to even blink. They were touched by Luffy's persistence, shed tears because of Zoro's strength, cupped their hearts because of Chopper's cuteness, laughed at Sanji's curly eyebrows, peeked at Nami's perky breasts like thieves, and almost got into a fight over who had a better figure between Nami and Robin. Time flew, and youth was gone, never to return to that day. He once thought that Luffy didn't exist in this world, but when he saw the pirate flag, Chenguang felt as if his memory had been devoured. It was a grinning skull wearing a straw hat with a red rim. It was the pirate flag of the Straw Hat Pirates. At this moment, Chenguang's nose instantly turned sour. Crossing the barrier between two worlds had dealt a heavy blow to his heart. "Mr. Wright, what's wrong?" Buldev, who was behind Chenguang, noticed that Chenguang's shoulders were trembling. Chenguang rubbed his eyes. "No, nothing. By the way, Bob, was there a pirate named Luffy in this world?" Chenguang asked Bob. Bob carefully thought for a long time, then said, "Sir, you really asked the right person. Only the well-informed Bob can answer your question. Nearly 2,000 years ago, there was indeed such a great pirate group. If they hadn't suddenly disappeared, Captain Luffy might have become the greatest king of the sea after Gol Roger. But the sea is forgetful. Although Luffy was powerful, he disappeared too abruptly and didn't leave any treasures behind. No one sang praises of his glory, so he was gradually forgotten. But the older generation of Neptune all know of him. Can his body grow longer? Is he a rubber man? Did he eat rubber fruits?" Even though he knew it was impossible, Chenguang still couldn't help but ask. "Rubber fruits? What's that?" "Nothing, pretend I didn't ask." Finally, the giant ship stopped completely, and a small boat was put down from the side of the giant ship. It had no sails, but it moved quickly on the sea like a water snake. A hearty laugh came from the boat far away. "Oh, ha ha ha. I finally meet you, Mr. Wright." A tall but thin figure suddenly appeared in front of Chenguang. Chenguang looked up at the man. His eyes were deep, his eyes were almost invisible, his cheekbones were high, and there was almost no flesh. He was so thin that only a bag of skin was left. "Skeleton Brook. Where did Luffy go?" Chenguang blurted out. Musician Brook's smiling face froze in an instant, and an invisible momentum emerged from him. The sea behind him shook fiercely, and a pit of hundreds of feet deep and hundreds of feet in diameter suddenly appeared. His Poseidon-class Haoshiku Haki was out of control. Chapter 502. With Brook's sudden loss of control, it was as if the entire treasure island had been hit and trembled slightly. He has been in the Sea of Time for a whole year. The most powerful pirate that Chenguang has seen is only a captain in the top 50 with armament Haki. This is the first time that he has encountered a Sea Emperor-level powerhouse. The earth under his feet trembled, but it was only a slight leakage of Brook's power. "Mr. Wright, you are really funny." Brook was silent, and Watson, who was next to him, quickly came forward to ease the atmosphere. Chenguang is 100% sure that his judgment is not wrong, but this skeleton Brook is deliberately concealing his identity. Perhaps he has other considerations, so he pretended that he didn't mention anything and put a smile on his face again. "I, Wright, on behalf of Treasure Island, welcome the arrival of musician Mr. Brook. Mr. Wright is really polite." Brook seemed to have recovered, and his skeletal face showed an ugly smile, but it gave people a sense of goodwill. The royal families from the central continent then led their teams to greet Wright Square. After a brief greeting, the group of people, surrounded by the entire Treasure Island people, walked towards Right Square. Along the way, Brooke was quiet and thoughtful, and Guang was no better than him. But when the two arrived at the square and saw the piano placed in the middle of the square, Brooke's eyes bloomed. Guang turned around and motioned for Brooke to go up first. "Mr. Brooke, please." Brooke was a little excited. "I remember the last time I came to Treasure Island, it was still a messy slum, but now such a beautiful square has been built. I think this must be the credit of Mr. Right. Everyone. I just learned that this square is called Right Square. So I, Brooke, propose to build a statue of Mr. Right in the middle of the square. How about it?" No one thought that before the contest between the two sides had even begun, Brooke had already put forward such a proposal. In the sea of time, statues have a very special meaning. So far, only a few people have left statues for people to admire, even including the statue of Gold Roger suffering on the execution platform. Although Guang was quite accomplished now, no one had mentioned the matter of the statue because no one had enough weight to speak up. But if these words were spoken by Brooke, one of the 12 strongest sea emperors, then the concept would be different. Brooke's action made the two sides pay respect to Guang before the fight even began. Guang himself felt it the most. Following Brooke's words, his faith value actually soared by thousands. This proved that at least thousands of people present were influenced by Brooke's words and recognized his level in their hearts. He had worked himself to death for 4 hours to be able to influence so many faith points, but Brooke only needed to say a few words. Just as he was about to be modest, Bob suddenly jumped out from the side, worthy of being Mr. Brooke. "All my life, I, little Bob, have only admired my master, Mr. Right. Now, at last, I see you, who are as great as Mr. Right in my heart. For my master to be recognized by Mr. Brooke, my little Bob's life is worth it." After saying that, this guy actually began to wipe his tears. Not knowing why, Guang felt that he was crying tears of joy. He definitely felt glad that even if he lost, he didn't have to fight to the death. "This is too shameful." Guang calmly waved his hand. Boldev came forward and knocked Bob on the back of the head, knocking him unconscious and dragging him to the side. "I've let Mr. Brooke see a joke." Guang restrained his thoughts. Although this square is good, the sound of the piano is too low. Although there are a lot of people here and everyone is quiet enough, only the people near the piano can hear the sound. It's really a pity. Brooke waved his hand. "Watson, take out all the sound shells we found in the outer sea. Since I took the initiative to challenge you, in order to thank you for your generosity, I will give you these sound shells as a gift." As Watson spoke, he had his attendants open one big box after another. They took out a dozen large shells that were so thick that a person could wrap his arms around them and place them around the square. Finally, Watson put a small shell on the piano, turned around, and nodded to Guang and Brooke. "It's done." Brooke was about to explain, but Guang raised his hand. Of course, he knew that this thing was called a sound shell. He was ecstatic. He had been worrying about how to spread his music. How come he didn't think that since the world of the Sea of Moment was taken from One Piece and Pirates of the Caribbean, then it was reasonable to have those colorful shells? It's just that no one had discovered it before. But for him, this was not a problem at all. He was a man with a divination ball. In the Sea of Moment, there was nothing he couldn't find. Although he couldn't leave, sooner or later, he could use his influence to let others get it. "So, shall we start?" Guang asked. Brooke nodded. "Since I am the challenger, then let me go first." Guang declined to comment. So far, the bards he had met in the Sea of Moment, although they may have some talent, but no one could compare with him. As a player with the entire music library of all the piano artists on Earth, he was too much of a bully. Brooke's fingers were slender and slender. This was necessary, after all, they were almost skeletons. But his fingers were also very flexible. As he began to play, the sweet music echoed around the square, which was the credit of the sound shells arranged by Watson. These sound shells were collected by the one placed on the piano, and then transmitted to the large sound shells placed in every corner of the square using principles that modern science couldn't explain. It was just like the sound system used in concerts in modern society. When Brooke's song ended, many people in the square, after a brief silence, applauded one after another. In addition, among the tens of thousands of people in the square, there was actually someone who comprehended hockey on the spot. Worthy of standing at the top of this world's bards, the level of his self-created music was absolutely not inferior to the famous masters that had appeared on Earth. Chen Guang was speechless. Bob silently carried the backpack he stole from Chen Guang's office on his shoulder, and then was pressed to the ground by Baldeff. "Mr. Wright, please." Brooke stood up. Chen Guang pondered in his heart. If he were to bring out a classic from the modern era, his performance might only be on par with Chen Guang. Not to mention that Chen Guang was a sea monarch expert. Although Chen Guang didn't deliberately display his aura, it was inevitable that his unique domineering aura would be integrated into his music. Worthy of being the musician Brooke, he was really strong. If this goes on, I will lose. Bracing himself to sit on the piano, Chen Guang recalled the contest with the jazz master on the Virginia. His mind flashed, and he finally thought of an unconventional method. "Although you are very powerful, but I, your brother, am a cheat." He first turned his head to the side and apologetically smiled at Brooke, and then said, "I'm sorry." Immediately, he began to play. In the blink of an eye, the audience was in an uproar. Because the music he played was exactly the same as what Brooke had just played. A perfect copy, without any deviation, simply so accurate that it made people feel horrified. The bards of the Instantaneous Sea, in addition to the 10 songs taught by Chen Guang, all the other songs were their own original compositions. They combined all of their own understanding of art to form a complete song, but they couldn't teach it to others. Now, Brooke had just played a song, and Chen Guang completely copied it. This was simply beyond people's understanding. Brooke looked at Chen Guang as if he was looking at a monster. When the long song finally ended, he couldn't help but ask, "This? Why is this?" Chen Guang didn't explain to him, just smiled and stood up, gesturing him to continue, with an unfathomable look on his face. Although there was no music score, as a player, as a cheat who could cheat by relying on his faith, he only needed to pay tens of thousands of faith points to play back the song that Brooke had just played in his mind. Then, following the sound in his mind, he played it mechanically, as if he was playing against a music score. Although his performance was only similar, it lacked the soul of hockey bestowed by Brooke, and couldn't make people advance to hockey on the spot, but as long as the sound was exactly the same, it was scary enough. Bellucci refused to believe it, and once again played another of his own tunes. Chen Guang did the same. After going back and forth 9 times, Brooke finally put down his hands. I lost." Chen Guang wasn't in a hurry to let him admit defeat. He still didn't stand up from the piano, but waved his hand and said, "Mr. Brooke, I have my own song here. It won't be too late for you to admit defeat after you listen to it." Immediately, Chen Guang picked up the small sound shell in front of him, which was responsible for collecting music, and loudly said, "Everyone listen. People below the undead level, immediately leave here. Go to a place where you can't hear the sound. This song will kill all of you." The huge square was in an uproar. On Earth, there was such a song. Its name was Black Sunday, also known as Melancholy Sunday. It was composed by a self-taught Hungarian musician, Roland Charles. In terms of artistic achievements, he was not very high, but he left behind this strange piece of music. According to rumors, countless people chose to commit suicide after listening to the original version of this song. Of course, in modern society, many different versions of Black Sunday could be searched on the internet, but almost no one would do anything irrational after listening to such a song. Many people thought that in the early days of the previous world, when information was not developed, some people overinterpreted this song, exaggerated its magic, and just looked for a gimmick to increase the sales of the record. But there was another theory, that the real original version was destroyed as early as 1945 because it was too dark and had a very bad influence. Now that everyone can hear is not the original version, of course, it can't show the true magic of this song. This statement has a certain accuracy. However, in fact, the original vinyl record of this song sold tens of millions of copies around the world, so how could it be completely destroyed? In addition, the so-called music score was in the author's tomb and in a university in the United States, but this is mostly false and can't be confirmed. However, Chen Guang can tell others with certainty that whether it is the original vinyl record or the so-called music score, they are not the real original song. The real original song was played by the original author, Ruinch Charles. On that desperate Sunday, after he had just broken up with his girlfriend, he had a burst of inspiration. He sat alone in front of the piano and played this 47-minute-long song for the first time. This is the real original version. Even the music scores that Ruinch Charles wrote later on had changed quite a bit compared to the inspiration that he had at the beginning. Even the officially released music scores were just one-sided and far-fetched memories. They only had the form, but they did not have a real soul. Even Ruinch Charles himself couldn't play anymore, let alone others. But Chen Guang can. At this time, what Chen Guang is going to play is the inspiration that Ruinch Charles captured for the first time when he wrote this song. This was the most monstrous aspect of Chen Guang's music player. As long as it existed in the past, he could perform it. Even if it is a lost song in a sense. In addition, the realm of transient sea is obviously different from the real world. Playing the song here will conform to some unique rules of the transient sea. The wandering poets and their music in the realm of transient sea have a layer of magic that modern science can't explain. It can even help people to improve their understanding of hockey. Therefore, Chen Guang himself is not sure what kind of effect this forbidden song will have on the people in the transient sea. Right now, he doesn't want to become a butcher, he just wants to be famous. Letting the undying rank and above expert stay is also because Chen Guang speculates that only people who have reached this level can withstand the impact of the song. But how can these ordinary people be willing to leave? This is an unprecedented showdown between the two peak wandering poets in history. Everyone is hesitant and unwilling to leave. Brooke looked at Chen Guang's serious expression. "Lord Wright, are you serious?" Brooke has already admitted defeat in his heart, his speech and expression are also quite respectful. Chen Guang nodded. "Of course, this song is beyond your imagination." Immediately, Chen Guang turned to Bob and the others behind him and said, "Bob, Janet, Shauna, Celine, you all also leave here." Bob said, "Lord, actually I have a good suggestion." "Say it." Chen Guang's expression became more and more dignified. "In any case, aren't there at most 100 or 200 undying rank experts here? Why don't you let everyone move into the bar, close the door, put away the open-air piano platform, and find some people to guard outside? Let me help you put away the sound shell." "Chen Guang, what you said makes a lot of sense." "Pfft." Brooke laughed out loud. Chen Guang covered his face, his prestige has been swept to the ground. Buldev gave Bob a kick. "Little Bob, you should quietly say this kind of thing." Chapter 503. Because of Chen Guang's order, no matter how reluctant the ordinary people were, they had no choice but to obediently leave. Chen Guang clearly told them that this was not an act, not a joke, and not a boast. Once this piece of music is played, people will really die. By the time he finished all this, an hour had already passed. The sky outside was getting dark, the sun was setting in the west, and the evening sun was shining down from the other side of the sea, but the moon was already high up in the sky. Under the illumination of the sun and the moon at the same time, the sky of Treasure Island was filled with a dusky atmosphere, making people feel gloomy and depressed. Chen Guang sat in Wright's bar with a grim expression. Nearly 200 undying rank and above powerhouses were all sitting upright in the bar. Even the central royal families whose strength did not reach the standard were chased out. Outside the bar, dozens of volunteers with their ears plugged tightly surrounded the bar, preventing anyone from approaching. Old Bob stood far away and thought enviously. Although he didn't want to admit it, sometimes he also wished that he could be as strong as Boldev. Chen Guang gently drank a mouthful of water and looked around with an extremely grave expression. Mr. Wright, it's done. Brook, one of the 12 Ocean Emperors, seemed to be subdued by Chen Guang's attitude as if he was facing a formidable enemy. He subconsciously lowered his voice and said so. Boldev, check again. You must make sure that no one below undying rank can hear the sound of the piano. I really don't know what kind of consequences this will bring. Chen Guang and Brook nodded and instructed again. Brook also ordered Watson to walk around again and check whether the doors and windows were tightly closed. After ensuring that everything was foolproof, Chen Guang took a deep breath, suddenly stood up, and said with some excitement, "Everyone, I believe many of you already know how many songs I have played this year. But I can tell you that the song I am going to play today is different. The emotions contained in this song represent the most despairing moment of a person's life. In the process of my performance, perhaps many unexpected things will happen. You will remember the lowest state of mind in your life, and your mind will be greatly shaken. If you can get through this, I believe that this will be an extremely important turning point in your lives. Of course, I didn't really want anyone to die here. So, if I find someone can't hold on any longer, I will stop playing in time. Then at this time, you have to remember that I stopped because of you. It was you who ruined the opportunity for the 200 people here to listen to the complete song. Then you are a sinner." The more Chen Guang spoke, the more intense his tone became. There was an extremely fanatical look on his face. With his current status in the Treasure Island and even the Momentary Sea, no one dared to look down on his solemn attitude. Although Boldev's reputation is not obvious, his strength is close to the Sea Emperor level of armament hockey, and even he is infected by him to the point that he almost stops breathing. Brook, who was sincerely convinced by him, heavily patted his skeletal chest and said, "Lord Wright, with me, Brook here, I will not let this happen. If anything goes wrong, I will throw the person out at the first moment. Everyone, don't blame me for being ruthless, this is also to protect everyone." "Good. Then, I'll start." Chen Guang sat down and slowly put his hands on the keys. "Everyone, clean your ears and prepare to listen to the most pessimistic and despairing song in the history of the Momentary Sea." In fact, he didn't need to challenge Black Sunday to be able to defeat Brook in a sense. However, this wasn't the result Chen Guang wanted. What he wanted was to crush Brook in an open and above-board manner. He wanted to make Brook admit his defeat wholeheartedly and take out a song that could make his name resound throughout the entire Momentary Sea from then on. The choice of the original Black Sunday, which is one of the 3 forbidden songs in the history of emotional rendering, is undoubtedly the most appropriate. Even if this is the Momentary Sea, because of some special reasons, too deep emotional rendering and touching is a risky and crazy move, which is likely to bring unexpected results, but if you don't lose the child, you can't catch the wolf. Chen Guang thinks it's worth it. Take a gamble and turn a bicycle into a motorcycle. As long as he can do it, he can make Brook completely convinced and let everyone think that he is the most powerful bard in the momentary sea. From then on, he won't have to continue to waste time on playing. He just needs to wait for his reputation and sound to spread, and then he can lie down and collect faith value. Then he can devote all his energy to the new business, right divination house. Finally, the first note of a Black Sunday was played, and the heavy atmosphere in the bar suddenly became darker and gloomier without any warning. Even the air began to thicken, making it difficult for people to breathe. The oil lamp, which was already very dim, swayed even though there was no wind, flickering on and off. Everyone in the audience was aware of the change in the atmosphere. This song really destroyed their minds. From the beginning, it pulled every one of them into an incomparably depressed state of mind. Brook's strength is tyrannical and his will is even more tenacious. However, he also recalled the reluctance and pain in his heart when he bid farewell to Captain Luffy and the others. He also recalled the despair and desolation he felt after waiting for 1,000 years without any news from his companions. What a despairing symphony it was. It was like a merciless monster, irresistibly and greedily devouring every inch of hope in the depths of one's heart. It could even make the most optimistic person lose all hope in an instant. Fortunately, everyone present is an undying rank expert and above. They have all experienced the trials and tortures between life and death. They all possess a constant and strong soul. Even in the face of such terrible setbacks and torture, they can still barely maintain their original hearts. Their souls were gradually brought into a storm by the music. They either dreamed of parting with their companions, or dreamed of their loved ones being torn apart in front of them, or recalled their most respected captain being torn to pieces in defeat, or like Brook, they became more and more desperate after thousands of years of bitter waiting. But they all persevered. No one would have thought that at this time, the one in the most awkward situation is not others, but the performer Chen Guang himself. F***CKU. I miscalculated. The audience is all undying rank. I'm not one. The old man is just a cute college student. When I learned this song in the piano world, my mind was sealed. I didn't feel anything at that time, but now I'm in a very bad situation. I've been pretending to be pretentious for a long time, and now the pretentious level is about to break through the sky. I was the first to be scared, and all my previous efforts have been wasted. I'm really F***ed up. Playing the piano in the sea of moments is poisonous. Originally, this song made a lot of people commit suicide after listening to it. Now, the emotional rendering seems to have been amplified by 100 times. The old man can't hold on any longer. As the saying goes, no matter how one calculates, one can't predict that the weakest one here is Chen Guang himself. But he has already forced himself into a corner, and there is no way out. After playing for less than 10 minutes, Chen Guang's face was pale and his head was covered in cold sweat. He anxiously looked around, hoping that someone would give up first. You're in so much pain and look so ferocious. Quickly take out your knife and commit suicide. I beg you. Baldef, you idiot. You can't hold on any longer. Help. Chen Guang winked at Baldef. Baldef's mood became more and more excited. Mr. Wright actually values me so much, Baldef, must not let him down. I must hold on. My hockey is ready to burst out. Today, I will use Mr. Wright's great music to break through Haoshiku hockey. I will use my whole life strength to defend Mr. Wright's majesty. Looking at the increasingly bright and fanatical light in Baldef's eyes, Chen Guang burst into tears. What should I do? Who the hell can save me? You little bastards, why are you so hot? At this time, Chen Guang finally deeply understood what Ruri had said, that his mind was not strong enough and his mind could not reach the true standard of a redeemer. Chapter 504. Bang! With another loud noise, Buldev used his hockey, which had just broken through the haushiku, to cut open the black fog with one palm. He saw Qinguang's head hit the corner of the piano and his head was full of blood. Fuck! Lord Wright is going to commit suicide. It turned out that he was really going to die. Everyone, at this moment, burst into tears and were moved to the extreme. In order to help everyone, Lord Wright played this forbidden song that would make him depressed and not want to live. He succeeded. He made a total of 200-strong undead hockey advance, and even Brooke, one of the 12 Sea Emperors who had reached the peak of the Sea of Time, advanced to another new realm. He wants to set off a new era of the Sea of Time. What a great feeling this is. Qinguang's head was full of blood and his eyes were listless as he looked at these people. His consciousness had been shattered by the impact of Black Sunday, which was integrated with the rules of the Sea of Time. He had a splitting headache, as if there were 10,000 horses tied to ropes and tearing his body. Before his last consciousness collapsed, he only cursed in his heart. I'm playing in the wilderness, but this time I've gone too far. Then Qinguang punched himself in the chest. Everyone, I'm going to die. He screamed hysterically again, what the F***? Oh my god. Bad luck. Ah. Qinguang spurted blood and fell on his back. Brooke rushed forward and hugged Qinguang. After a little test of hockey, he began to cry bitterly. Lord Wright's heart is broken. No. No. Mr. Wright. Oh my god. There was a wail below. Brooke plopped down on his knees, his eyes were so deep that his eyeballs could not be seen, and 2 drops of crystal-clear tears flowed down. He thought to himself, I once thought that my dedication was great enough, but compared with you, I am simply the difference between the light of a firefly and the splendor of the sun and the moon. The news that Lord Wright was killed by his own forbidden song in order to let 200 undying rankers advance into the Tyrant Aura realm swept through Treasure Island like thunder. As soon as Brooke knelt down, it was as if the first domino had been pressed. The 200 undying experts knelt down one after another. Then, the more than 1 million people on the island felt an indescribable grief in their hearts as they uniformly knelt down in the direction of Wright Square. That night, the clouds and thunder were raging on Treasure Island. It was raining cats and dogs. Strong winds and lightning swept across the island. Everyone knelt in every corner of the island and cried sorrowfully. Even the heavens and earth of the Sea of Moments seemed to be grieving over Wright's death. Only one person, with the most brainless worship, charged forward against the sudden storm and lightning, washed by the rain and tears. My Mr. Wright, you can't die. This man was Bob. Of course, Qinguang wouldn't die. He had 99 chances to resurrect. In fact, the moment he died, he resurrected immediately. But there was a slight accident. The unlucky Black Sunday was too fierce, and the after-effects were too strong. Just as he was about to resurrect, his soul was scattered again. Thus, his whole person was stuck in a very mysterious state, on the verge of death but not dead, on the verge of life but not alive. His soul and body couldn't be unified, and he was only in a muddle-headed state of emptiness. Sooner or later, Qinguang would be able to defeat Black Sunday, but it would take time. Under Bob's insistence, in the end, Qinguang wasn't erected a tombstone. Within 3 days, Wright Square was transformed. 200 undying experts personally took charge of the hard work. In the center of the square, a huge statue of the handsome Mr. Wright was built. Behind the statue, there was a hall made of white jade, named the Sage Temple. Qinguang's body was placed in a crystal coffin, hidden in a ventilated and cool basement, guarded by Buldev and Brooke, who had decided to settle down here. Brooke was appointed as the first head of the Sage Temple's fan club by Bob, who claimed to know right best. Boldev was the deputy head of the Sage Temple's fan club, and the other 200 undying experts were the backbone members of the fan club. More than 50 of them had armament hockey. Of course, they were born after the collective advancement. At that time, many people didn't understand why Bob didn't name it Knights Templar or Guardians of the Temple, but named such a lofty organization after food. Bob angrily rebuked everyone. When Mr. Wright first came to Treasure Island, he praised me. He said that I was his first fan in the transient sea. What Mr. Wright loved the most were fans. Mr. Wright comes from a mysterious area that you can't even imagine. This is the culture of his hometown. Since it's the culture of Mr. Wright's hometown, there must be a great philosophy in it. Brooke was the first to express his support. Moreover, Bob can be 100% sure that although Mr. Wright doesn't have the strength of an undying expert, he will definitely be resurrected, in this body. Bob's words shocked everyone to death. His judgment was based on the information he had secretly investigated. According to the information, 100 years ago, Mr. Wright, the second officer of the Annie, was around 20 years old. The current Mr. Wright was also a little over 20 years old. Mr. Wright doesn't have an undying soul, which can only mean that he has an undying body and soul. Unlike other people's undying, he doesn't age at all. This was the reasoning of a professional intelligence merchant. Bob firmly believed that this was the secret he was most proud of. Even Boldev didn't know about it. Boldev comforted him. "Little Bob, I understand your feelings, but..." Bob jumped up and angrily hit Boldev. "Boldev, you idiot. As long as 1 year, you will believe me." It didn't take a year. 3 months later, everyone believed Bob's judgment. How long can a dead body be preserved? This question doesn't need to be investigated too deeply. But after 3 months, Wright's complexion was still rosy. If not for his lack of breathing and heartbeat, others would even think that he didn't die at all, but just fell into a deep sleep. Believe me, Mr. Wright will definitely wake up. This is Bob's epitaph. 5 years later, in order to develop the sound shell brought back by Brooke into a phonograph shell, which can record zither music and broadcast it all over the world, the overworked Bob passed away on a quiet night at the age of 64. Before his death, he finally drew the last stroke on the design. The phonograph shell was announced. The zither music that Chen Guang left for his 10 disciples, as well as the 10 pieces he left for Brooke, were poured into countless phonographs, accompanied by merchant ships or pirate ships, and brought to all parts of the Sea of Transient. Not only that, but Brooke also systematized the musical notation taught by Chen Guang. Henceforth, the bards of the entire Sea of Transient will no longer have to practice alone. They will use the musical notation to record their every trace of inspiration, and at the same time, they can also learn new music from other people's musical notation. More powerful bards will be born in the Sea of Transient, and at the same time, more powerful pirates will be born. Chen Guang first used the Black Sunday to raise the realm of 200 people on the spot, and then left behind the musical notation to change the profession of bards. In the foreseeable future, the strength of the pirates of the entire Sea of Transient will be greatly improved. Poseidon created the history of pirates, Gol Roger used his death to open the great era of pirates, and Mr. Wright used his selfless dedication to open a new era of the strong. Another 5 years passed, and the 4-year-old Bob followed a huge fleet back from the outer seas. This pirate group was called the Royal Pirate Group. Chen Guang fulfilled his promise, bestowing Bob with an undying soul, and after Bob was resurrected, he became a member of the Royal's crew. Although there were countless coincidences involved, the young but mature Bob believed that it was all Mr. Wright's arrangement. The most mysterious new power in the Sea of Transient in the last 100 years, Bullen, arrived with her sovereign king-like powerful fleet, causing Brooke to be extremely nervous. He and Boldev, who was guarding Treasure Island, brought dozens of undying rank experts to the port and waited. Buldev, although today I already possess the power of an overlord, and Bulan's mysteriousness is known to all. On the Enroyal, there are at least 300 undying rank experts. Nobody knows what frightening methods they have. Later, when the confrontation starts, you must protect the Sage Temple, and absolutely cannot disturb Lord Wright's rest. Brooke shook his crutch and said in a heavy tone. Vicious Wolf Buldev's face was gloomy. Does this female devil and want to become enemies with the entire Sea of Transient? She actually dares to attack Treasure Island. This is simply unforgivable. Perhaps she is jealous of our status, and also wants to become Lord Wright's follower. Another undying rank expert speculated. Seeing the fleet gradually approaching the shore, and the skull flag inlaid with roses becoming more and more distinct, Brooke waved his hand. Everyone be quiet. Prepare for battle. However, the confrontation between the two sides did not last for more than a second. The 20-year-old and, carrying the 4-year-old Bob in one hand, came treading on the waves, followed by Watney, Bartu, and other super experts. The 4-year-old Bob shouted in a childish voice, "Captain, don't shoot. We're on the same side." Buldev, do you still remember little Bob by the Daming Lake? Buldev and Bob, who had followed Chinguang for a whole year, had heard Chinguang muttering these two words when no one was around. At that time, the two also questioned Chinguang for a long time, asking him what the captain's profession was, and which lucky woman Xia Yuha was. Chinguang gave the two men a kick each. But about a month before his death, Bob felt that his condition was not right, and that he would not live long. He had already written his will, and with Buldev, agreed on the secret signal to meet. At that time, Buldev ridiculed Bob for not working hard to train, saying that he had no hockey, and that it was impossible for him to obtain the qualification of immortality, but Bob said another famous saying left by Chinguang, "You still have to have a dream, what if it comes true?" Now that the secret signal was correct, the hostility between Brooke and Buldev instantly melted. Buldev laughed so hard that he clutched his stomach. "Now you really have become little Bob." And threw little Bob far away, and Buldev caught him and pulled open his clothes. "Come, little Bob, Grandpa will feed you milk." "Get lost!" Bob roared at the top of his voice. Chapter 505. Since then, Annie directly lived in the Sage Temple. Although Brooke strongly opposed it, it was of no use. Annie knew Wright 100 years earlier than him. "I have been waiting for him for 100 years. I don't want to waste another second. Brooke, although you may be a bit stronger than me now, if you must taste this old woman's fish, this old woman doesn't mind dismantling your skeleton." A crazy woman who waited for a man for 100 years, even Brooke didn't dare to look straight at her. Of course, what made him choose to concede was Bob's mediation, confirming that Chinguang had indeed said that he was once the second officer on the Enroyal. When Chinguang opened his eyes again, he saw a blonde girl with two big sapphire blue eyes bending down to wipe his body. Who is this? Is this figure going to break through the horizon? Your career line is a bit explosive. Your posture of bending down is a bit undignified. Is there a heaven in the sea of time? Did I accidentally open a new world? Wait, this girl looks a bit familiar. Perhaps because he had slept for too long, just waking up, his brain was still a bit slow. After a long time, a name gradually emerged in his heart. He finally remembered who she was. Captain Annie. Chinguang's mouth was somewhat unclear. He hadn't spoken for a long time. He almost forgot how to use his vocal cords to pronounce. The 18-year-old Annie's body suddenly shook, and the silk handkerchief in her hand suddenly fell to the ground. She slowly raised her head, and a pair of beautiful eyes stared at him. After a short moment of silence, tears poured down like a tide. She frantically shook Chen Guang's shoulder, roaring at the top of her voice. Right. You bastard. I waited for you for 100 years. You finally came back. But you slept here for 100 years. You are a complete bastard. How much do you want to torture me before you give up? Why don't you let me die quietly? Why let me die again and come back to life? Why let me bear this endless pain of longing? Why did you leave without saying goodbye? Why didn't you confess to me one more time? I stared at the boundless night on the sea. I watched the flowers wither in the changing of the 4 seasons. I looked for you on the boundless sea while growing old and white-haired. Do you know how desperate I was? I wanted to die peacefully, but because of this damned undying soul, I had no choice but to wake up in my infancy. But from the moment I opened my eyes, even when I was still a baby, your name was always in my head. I finally heard from you. I crossed the ocean from 40 million kilometers away, tore apart 3 sea emperor monsters, defeated the black storm that no one could defeat, and shattered the lightning that fell from the sky. When I finally saw you, you were lying in this coffin like a corpse. I have to look at you year after year again. I have to look at your youthful face while I grow old day by day. Can you understand how afraid I was when you woke up? I was an ugly old woman, but I couldn't help but want to stay here and guard you. Chen Guang blankly looked at the crying Annie. Memories flooded in like a tide. He remembered that starry night when he was hung on the mast of Annie. After a long time, he slowly said, I thought you didn't like me. You are a fool. If I didn't like you, I would have chopped you to death the first time you boarded the ship. Annie Polly, this female devil whose name shook the entire transient sea, the most powerful and mysterious sea emperor in the last 100 years. Even Brooke, who had been promoted to an overlord, didn't dare to look down on her. This fully deserving of being the most powerful woman in the transient sea, this woman who had already reincarnated between life and death 3 times, and waited for Chen Guang for 3 lifetimes. At this moment, she gently stroked her long hair, looking like an innocent young girl. Frankly speaking, Chen Guang really didn't expect that after staying on and royal for half a year, Annie would care so much about him. In his heart, he was more willing to regard Annie as a friend. He didn't dare to hope that this beautiful and powerful captain would truly like him. At that time, he plucked up the courage to write her a love letter, but that was the result of losing a bet with old Jack and Bartu. Actually, I thought I wasn't that outstanding when I was the 2nd officer. Chen Guang said again. Annie moved her face closer. No, in my heart, you are more outstanding than anyone else. You are like a devil descending from the sky, easily shredding my heart. Obviously, I only stayed with you for half a year, but I feel like I have stared at you for an entire 20 years. What kind of magic did you cast on me? Chen Guang's mouth was wide open. Indeed, in a sense, he had indeed stayed in the transient sea for 20 years, but that was the accumulation of 20 years of resurrection. This was the greatest secret in his heart. He originally thought that it was impossible for Annie to know about it. However, he had underestimated Annie's 6th sense. Perhaps, Annie was originally not an ordinary existence. Otherwise, when he first entered the realm of transient sea, he would not have unknowingly landed on her ship. All right. I'm sorry, I can't explain it to you, but now I'm back. A woman waited for you for 200 years, the most appropriate thing to say to her, besides the 3 words I'm sorry. Chen Guang really didn't know how to answer. What's even more sorrowful is, he knew that sooner or later he would leave, so he couldn't even give her a promise. Annie smiled. Yes, I didn't wait in vain. How are Warnie and the others? Chen Guang asked. They're fine, but now I don't have time to reminisce with you, my whole body is about to burn. Annie! Don't be like this. I still haven't mentally prepared myself, This is too sudden. I will resist. If you can resist Annie, who has the strongest hockey and is now the head of the Transient Sea's 5 hegemons, using the words you once taught me, I will give you 32 likes. The deafening rumble spread to every corner of Leyte Island in an instant. Bob, who was lying on a beach chair sucking on a feeding bottle while glaring at Baldy fiercely, fell off from the chair due to the impact. Oh no! My little Bob. Buldev, you idiot. The sound came from the holy temple. Something happened. When Buldev and Bob were about to reach the vicinity of the holy temple, Brooke came face to face. Brooke! You shameful deserter. Buldev and Bob cursed together. Brooke spat at the two men, deserter my ass. Lord Wright is awake, oh ha ha ha. Then why are you running? Quickly kneel with me. Bob struggled in Buldev's arms. Poor little Bob. Every time he appeared, he was either an old man or a baby. He had never been normal. Back then, when he returned with the Annie, he had taken good care of himself. As usual, he did not cultivate and instead became the butler of the Sage Temple. Based on Chen Guang's memory, he set up a Right Cultural Communication Company, sold phonographs to every corner of the Transient Sea, and built statues of Right on at least 100,000 floating islands. Then he died at the age of 92, and now he has just been resurrected, and is now 2 years old. Brooke stopped Buldev, who was about to go forward. You can't go. People will die. Buldev roared angrily, gritting his teeth. Brooke, if you make trouble again, I will bite you to death. Lord Wright is doing shameful things with Captain Annie. This sound, it's this sound. It's them. If you want to die, I won't stop you, but don't stop me from evacuating the crowd. Holy shit. Buldev cursed. Killing in the grass. Bob cursed with his unique baby voice. The violent tremors continued for a full 8 hours. The strongest pile driver in history finally met his match, the 28 ocean emperors of the Age of Experts, and Annie, the leader of the 5 hegemons, were naturally not easy to deal with. After waking up, Chen Guang's body was as powerful as a cheat in the Transient Sea. Of course, this was not the real divine immortal cup. His current body was powerful, but it couldn't be brought back to the real world. But this wasn't important. The important thing was that he could finally fight 80,000 rounds with others. This battle, the sky fell and the earth cracked, the sun and moon lost their light, the mountains howled and the seas roared. From noon when the sun was shining brightly, all the way until late at night when the waning moon hung high in the sky. The entire Central Sea was shaken by Right Island, causing huge waves. Even the vast central continent seemed to have been hit by someone. The above was purely boasting. But it was indeed frightening. Chen Guang lay in a huge pit that was at least a dozen zhang deep, his face filled with confusion. The magnificent sage temple had long been razed to the ground, the white jade shattered to the point where not even dregs were left. I don't know how you did it, but in short, your pile driver idol has appeared. It's a huge D*CK, I've already shaped it for you. Lioli's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. Fuck. This wave is good, very strong, bye. In just one shot, the pile driver idol had appeared. Also, what the hell do you mean you've already shaped it for me? I want to change it. At least change it to the shape of a cup. That way, when I mention this idol in the future, I can only say, it's an indescribable shape of 100 zhang. At this moment, Chen Guang was dumbfounded. Wait a minute. Speaking of which, there's still the Qilin arm. Chen Guang screamed in his mind. Lioli ignored him. Annie, who was dripping with sweat, came over again. Dear Right Chin, again. No, no, no. Let me take a breather. The strongest pile driver in history lowered its noble head in front of the even more unreasonable pirate queen. Chen Guang covered his face. I've been F***king pushed down again. Why again? In short, after half an hour, the people hiding in the east corner of Wright Island finally returned one after another. The total population of Wright Island today was much less than when it was called Treasure Island. In the past 100 years, because the Sage of the Sea rested here, the original trading function of Treasure Island was gradually stripped away and abandoned. This place turned into an existence similar to the Church's Holy Land, and was eventually renamed Wright Island. Those who could settle down here were either representatives of major forces, outstanding bards, or descendants of those who worked in Wright's bar. Other than that, there were also core members of Wright's Cultural Communication Company, where Bob was the general manager. Chen Guang first spent an hour to comfort everyone, especially old Warnie, who used to be a little follower and an old bastard. Now, little Bob couldn't stop crying. Annie, on the other hand, went to sleep with satisfaction. According to her words, my man is back, I'm going back to be a noble lady. Chapter 506. Following that, the conversation between Chen Guang and the crowd was basically made up of holy shit. It has become Wright Island. Holy shit. Sage Fan Club. Wright Cultural Communication Company. Holy shit, little Bob, you can do it. Of course. I am Lord Wright's most loyal servant. 2-year-old Bob bowed and said in a pious tone. Others didn't feel anything wrong, but for some reason, Chen Guang just didn't know why. Even if his temperament had already withstood the test of a Black Sunday, and was definitely not the same as before, at this moment, he really wanted to throw a shoehorn at Bob's face. No matter how he looked at it, Bob was asking for a beating. Right, didn't you say that I still have the Sage Temple and the statue? Where are they? Chen Guang looked left and right, up and down, but couldn't find them. Lord, before noon today, your temple is here, and the statue is there. Brooke pointed to 2 different places behind Chen Guang. Chen Guang pushed his hands, acting like he couldn't bear to recall the past. Forget it, it's gone, don't mind those details. Then he grabbed Bob and raised him in front of him. I really have to praise you, Bob. You've done a really good job, you've worked hard. Chen Guang looked at this child's face. He didn't expect this guy to remember what he had accidentally mentioned. In order to develop the phonograph shell, he had worked himself to death. Fortunately, he could be resurrected. What was even more amazing was that he had used 100 years to spread his name and phonograph shell to almost every place in the Sea of Time. Just now, Chen Guang sensed that his current production of faith value was as high as 130 billion a day. This meant that Bob's demonic claws had spread to almost 73% of the population of the Sea of Time. Right now, in Chen Guang's warehouse, there was an outrageous amount of faith value. He couldn't be bothered to count the exact number. After all, according to what Ruri had said, the small surprise that would appear after the daily production reached the level of 100 billion was already there. Just as he had expected, Lady Island could be moved by paying faith points. Then, the next step would be to first try to understand the relatively easier languages. Then, he would control the 10-kilometer-wide Lady Island and start an unprecedented tour of the Sea of Moments. Thinking about it, it was quite exciting. What is your ship? The old man's ship is an island. Accumulating faith should have been something that Chen Guang had to put in a lot of effort and work himself to death to achieve. In the end, after sleeping for 100 years, Bob had done it for him. Of course, he had to praise him heavily. Bob burst into tears again. Lord Wright. In order to spread your glory, I, old Bob, can bear it no matter how hard and tired I am. It was you, Lord, who changed my life. Lord, you said that you would give me immortality. Now, a lazy and untalented person like me can also have an immortal soul. It is all thanks to you, Lord. This guy kept shoving his tears and snot into Qin Guang's face. He was even scarier than Greasy Bob. Qin Guang hurriedly threw him away. Collect. Bob landed on the ground and stood up with his hands on his hips. Yes, Lord. Then, he immediately turned to Buldev and raised his eyebrows. Did you see that, Buldev? Although I, Bob, am not talented and can't learn hockey, I am more useful to Lord than you. In the future, you are not allowed to force me to learn hockey. Buldev glared at him fiercely. Little Bob, call me Daddy. Qin Guang watched the two quarreling with interest. He thought that with Buldev's arrogance, with Bob's character, he would definitely jump up and fight him. Unexpectedly, Bob first looked at Qin Guang with an aggrieved expression, then turned to Buldev and said with gritted teeth, Dad. Buldev grinned and hugged Bob, kissing him intimately on the cheek. He then turned to Qin Guang and said, Lord, 2 years ago, my wife gave birth to a chubby boy, Bob. Qin Guang's mouth formed an O shape. He first looked at Bob, whose face was as rotten as a bitter gourd, and then at Buldev, who was full of satisfaction. After a long time, he sighed. It's too tragic. There were 178 billion people in the instantaneous sea. How unlucky would Bob have to be reincarnated into the belly of Buldev's wife? From the perspective of probability, this was much more difficult than buying a lottery ticket and becoming rich overnight. Bob roared, Buldev. This time, when you die, I will marry 100 wives. Give birth to 800 sons. One of them will be you. Don't fall into my hands. You're a poisonous husky. Qin Guang slapped his forehead. Damn, this ethical relationship is too crazy. The great sage had awoken from his long slumber. This was a day worthy of celebration. Under Brooke and Bob's efforts, the transmission shell and the phonograph shell had spread throughout the instantaneous sea. Early in the afternoon, the news that Sage Wright had woken up from his dream spread like a wave through the spiderweb-like communication network of sound transmission shells. In the afternoon, when Qin Guang and Annie were locked in battle, the royal families of the Middle-earth continent, Nok continent, Eastern continent and many other continents came to a decision. Today was a special day. Every year, the 8th day of the 3rd month would be designated as the Day of the Sage. To commemorate the resurrection of the great Sage Wright, who had single-handedly started the era of the strong. Not only that, another legend that had been circulating in the Middle-earth Sea 100 years ago had also been confirmed. To be able to conquer Sir Wright in bed, only a woman of Ocean Emperor rank and above could do so. As expected of the great sage, everything he did was so powerful. To be able to fight with the terrifying Annie for 8 hours, he was fully deserving of being the overlord of the instantaneous sea. The instantaneous sea was a world of the strong where the weak were prey to the strong. This kind of thing that was very difficult to talk about in the outside world had instead added another layer of glory to Qin Guang in this world. He didn't sleep for the whole night. On one hand, it was to seek refuge. On the other hand, Qin Guang had been guarding the demon juicer the whole night. Looking at the room full of demon juicers, his mouth was about to crack from laughing. Halfway through his laughter, Qin Guang's expression changed and he reminded himself. I can't be so happy. I'm a respected great sage now. I've also experienced life and death for 100 years. I can't be so frivolous, I have to be steady. No, by the time I thought about it, I had already broken the spell. Damn, I feel like I'm hopeless. Pushing the door open, the loyal Bob was already waiting at the door with a bottle of milk. Who knew where he ordered a set of exclusive aristocratic clothing for babies? It looked quite out of place. My most respected Lord Wright, you're awake. Your most loyal servant, Bob, is here to greet you. Without saying anything, Chen Guang stripped Bob until he was only left with a diaper. This looks much more pleasing to the eye. My lord, you really have a keen eye. I also feel much more refreshed. Chen Guang strolled around the current Lady Island, observing the local customs and practices. 100 years would change a lot. The once bustling trade district and flea market district had long since become empty. Even the trading hall had been razed to the ground. What replaced it was a beautifully trimmed garden. Small statues of Chen Guang could be seen everywhere, as well as a phonograph that could play a zither with a light tap of one's palm. Anyone who came to Lady Island would fall in love with it. Because of its beautiful scenery, it was filled with a rich artistic atmosphere. Almost every year, there would be pirates recuperating here and advancing. However, the population of the entire Sea of Time was too great. If everyone were to flock here, Lady Island would probably sink to the bottom of the sea. Therefore, with the two hegemons, Brooke and Annie, as well as the agreement of the other three hegemons, including Blackbeard Teach, the following decision was made. Every year, only 50,000 slots would be open to the public. The slots would be distributed according to the population distribution of the major powers and the floating island. As for the negotiations between the powers, the Sage Temple couldn't care less. It was only right and proper for the strong to come first. Accompanied by Bob, Chen Guang chatted while thinking hard about how to carry out the business of the divination house. Currently, he had two ideas. One was to use his influence as a great sage to directly announce to the public that he needed people to sacrifice for him. Without a doubt, even if everyone knew that they would be unable to speak from then on, there would definitely be countless people flocking to him. However, Chen Guang felt that this wasn't appropriate. Up until now, he had built up the image of a selfless great man. This might damage his prestige. If people thought that he was demonized, it would affect the production of faith. That would not be worth it. Although he no longer lacked faith in the Sea of Time, Chen Guang was still counting on the exchange rate promised by Lioli after he left. After lying in bed for 100 years and spending so much effort, he couldn't possibly lose his integrity in his old age. Another way of thinking was to follow his original plan. He would use the model of a businessman to introduce a divination house service. However, there was a new problem. Chen Guang wasn't sure how receptive the people in the Sea of Moments were to this matter. How was he going to speak to them about it? After thinking hard for an entire day, he came up with nothing. By the time he returned to the mansion in the center of the island, the sun had already set. Annie was here again. The residents of Lady Island spent an unforgettable sleepless night. The entire island maintained a subtle frequency of vibration. From the beginning of the night until the sun rose in the morning, the vibration was more intense and lasting than yesterday. Early in the morning, lying in the pit, Chen Guang hazily looked at the mansion that had been razed to the ground. He then looked at Annie, who was sleeping soundly with her arms around him. His heart was filled with embarrassment. After a long time, a maid timidly came over. "Lord Wright, Lord Brooke wants to see you." Chen Guang let the maid find more maids to clean up the mess, while he shrunk his neck and walked towards the original Wright Square, which was now Brooke's office. Brooke had been living here for 100 years ever since he willingly lost to him. In order to maintain the dignity of Lady Island, he could be said to have worked hard without complaint. Today, when he shouldn't have been disturbed, he actually sent someone to deliver a message. Obviously, something big had happened. "Lord Wright, something has happened on the island." Brooke squirmed, his skeleton-like fingers crisscrossed. He looked very nervous and it was difficult for him to speak. Chapter 507. What happened? Is it very serious? In the past, Lady Island was round like the sun, but now we have forever lost a piece of land in the east. Now, Lady Island looks like a pizza that has been bitten off by Buldev, missing a corner. Chen Guang was furious. What? There's actually such a thing. Did someone attack us? Brooke shook his head. No, no, no. In the entire Sea of Time, no one would try to harm us, and no one would have the guts to do so. This is a very natural collapse. Fortunately, at that time, there was no one in that area. It happened this morning. The more Brooke said, the lower his head drooped. Chen Guang's face turned red. Oh my God, how could I do this? Was there such a big movement? I didn't realize it at all, as I was closely involved in the situation. Don't mind those details, losing a little piece of land is no big deal. In any case, it didn't sink, right? At this time, the ground under the two's feet suddenly trembled, the entire Lady Island fiercely shaking. Monstrous waves soared to the sky. No, not monstrous waves, but currents from all directions. Damn, Lady Island is going to sink. In a sense, as a speck of dust floating on the surface of a water cup, as a 10-kilometer diameter floating island, after losing a piece of land, the balance was broken, and after several hours of brewing, a major event finally happened. In Chen Guang's heart, 10,000 alpacas whizzed past. I really sank the island. The price of my life as husband and wife is a bit too high. Brooke, who has lived for thousands of years, had rarely seen such a terrible thing as the sinking of a floating island. He was scared to death. No one knew how deep the bottom of the sea was, but everyone knew that every floating island was a precious and non-renewable resource of the Sea of Time. Even if two super experts with a blood feud were to fight for their lives, they still wouldn't be willing to destroy every floating island. Floating islands are the most precious treasures bestowed by the god of the Sea of Time to the people of the sea. They are the most devout faith of all the intelligent beings in the entire Sea of Time, not to mention Lady Island, this large floating island. What happened? What should we do? My God! Brooke unexpectedly screamed. The incident happened in a hurry, and it was too late to escape. Even if experts like Chen Guang or Brooke could escape, it would be difficult for the existence on the island below the undying rank to survive this terrible, natural and man-made disaster. Chen Guang's mind raced, and an idea came to him in the blink of an eye. Thanks to the faith value, its effects were really too comprehensive. Now that Chen Guang knew what was going on, he no longer panicked. Instead, he let out an evil and wild laugh and looked at Brooke. Brooke, I really can't believe that you are actually one of the 5 hegemons. You've really lost my face. In Chen Guang's memory, the skeleton Brooke in the One Piece manga was also famous for being timid. As a skeleton, he was as timid as a mouse. He could even scare himself when he looked in the mirror. Brooke, the musician in the Sea of Fleeting Time, was no better. Lord Right. It's not that I'm a coward, it's just that this is too scary. It really gave me the creeps. Although I basically don't have any hair. Brooke still screamed, and then began to yell at the top of his lungs, everyone, quickly escape. It's going to sink. Buldev also fiercely pushed open the door and entered. Lord. I'll protect you. The shaking outside was getting more and more intense, and the huge island was rapidly sinking. Near the square, countless people were screaming and running in panic. Even Annie was awakened from her sleep, wearing a battle armor and stepping on the air. Annie angrily roared, "Who is it? Who dares to destroy this old lady's love nest?" Little Winnie, who was following behind her, reminded in a low voice, "Captain, it might be that when you and Uncle Wright were having sex, the shaking was too intense." Right Island might be. Annie, after a short silence, her whole body emitted black gas, and she suddenly raised her arms and shouted that, in any case, let's save as many as we can. Come. Princess Annie's royal guard wore soul. A black fog rose from her back, covering the sky and covering the earth. Her giant ship, and royal, unexpectedly appeared in mid-air, and then landed on the right square with a loud bang. This was one of the many powerful black magic that Annie had mastered, which could instantly summon the ship to her side. Everyone, quickly board the ship. Annie once again landed on the ground, one hand pressed on the ground, and an even denser black gas emitted from her body. The blue veins on her neck swelled, and a tyrannical domineering aura diffused from her body. She roared, "Rise for me." Seeing Annie's action, Brooke finally found his backbone. "I also have domineering aura. You just remembered it." Bob hugged Buldev and scolded, "Dad, bite him." Brooke and the other strong undead used their domineering aura together, finally slowing down the sinking speed of Right Island. Although it still couldn't stop it, it bought a lot of time for people to board the ship. At this time, Chen Guang coughed lightly, suddenly stood on the balcony, opened his arms, and said loudly, "Everyone, don't panic, I'm here." Everyone turned their heads to look at him. For a moment, Chen Guang's image became radiant. The way he opened his arms to embrace the air resembled a true saint. "Oh sea! Oh sky! I am willing to offer my soul, my life, my everything. Grant me the power of the prophet, the ruler of all things in the world, the spirit that controls wind and thunder, the Holy Spirit of the sea. Heed the call of my great prophet, Right Chen. Cross the distant space and time, gather on my territory, protect my people. Come." The power of fate. Cover this Right Island, turn it into the Ark of Life. Stirring up all the air in his chest, Chen Guang let out the loudest cry of his life. In this almost doomsday-like scene, everyone's attention was attracted by his seemingly mindless crazy action. One after another, the people who gathered raised their heads. For some reason, everyone had an illusion that at this time, Chen Guang's whole body was surging with a dazzling radiance that people couldn't look straight at. Great teleportation technique. Chen Guang continued to assume the pose of a charlatan, roaring, but his mouth was silently saying, "Pick a place, move for me, quickly." Lady Island, which had been sinking continuously, began to rise slowly. The seawater that had just poured in receded from each block, surging violently. In addition, every rock on the entire island, every inch of soil, every building connected to the island's ground, became sparkling and translucent in an instant, emitting a crystal-like radiance. The entire island continued to rise, and an unknown buzzing sound resounded throughout the world. Although no one knew what was happening at this time, this phenomenon was clearly beyond everyone's understanding. A miracle. An inconceivable miracle. Brooke exclaimed while covering his mouth. Annie also withdrew her domineering aura, her eyes filled with excitement and worship. "I knew you could do it. Worthy of being my, Annie's, man." Bob raised his arms and shouted, "My great master. Bob is your eternal believer." Brooke's eyes were filled with tears, thinking, "Luffy, did you see? Finally, such an inconceivable strong person appeared on the sea of time. He will certainly lead us to find true freedom." Chen Guang smiled at everyone, trying hard to maintain his unfathomable appearance, thinking, "To be honest, if not for this matter, I really didn't know that moving Right Island would cause such a big commotion. Now it's good, letting everyone experience it in advance, so that next time they can be mentally prepared. It's a blessing in disguise. Just don't know where it will be moved to." The radiance on the island gradually became more and more intense, including Chen Guang. Everyone couldn't see anything clearly, only a stretch of white. Even the people next to them couldn't see clearly. Finally, when everything became quiet, all the radiance suddenly disappeared. All around, it was pitch black. One couldn't even see one's fingers in front of one's hand. The rumbling sound didn't seem to stop, still sweeping towards the island like a tsunami. F***ck. I mean, randomly pick a place, but you can't directly choose the bottom of the sea. Regarding this situation, Chen Guang immediately understood. This is F***king embarrassing. I thought you were floating in the sky, but in the end, you are even more unreasonable. Teleportation is fine, but you directly teleported to the bottom of the sea for me. Hey, 110, come and save me, there's a cup here showing off, the situation is already out of control. Little Yaoling couldn't save him. In the darkness, the turbulent sea swept over like a huge swallowing beast. In the face of the majesty of nature, even Brooke and Annie, who stood at the top of the world, were filled with a feeling of powerlessness to resist. It's over. This time it's completely over. Brooke finally cried bitterly, shouting, Luffy. I'm sorry. I'm going to bring the secret to the bottom of the sea. Dying under such a disaster, it must be the god of the transient sea punishing me. I, Skeleton Brooke, am not willing. Annie threw herself at Chen Guang, her mind in a state of panic. She, who has always lived in the sea, knows the power of the sea. No one knows how deep the transient sea is. Rumor has it that the bottom of the sea is deeper than the length of the sea. She also doesn't know how many meters below the sea, that terrible water pressure can instantly crush the greatest powerhouse into pieces. She clenched the pendant on her chest, praying in her heart, Father, Grandfather, all my great ancestors passed down the power to me, I must bring my most beloved man back to the surface of the sea. The pendant suddenly released a dazzling radiance. This is the holy radiance, this is Annie's final trump card. Without a trace of hesitation, she is willing to use the magic contained in this pendant to protect Chen Guang. Under the illumination of the last ray of light in the darkness, everyone finally saw Chen Guang's expression. He still maintained a calm smile. Everyone, don't panic, I still have a second move. Great Holy Shield. Chapter 508. Hurry up and use some holy light shield. This time I'm really going to go overboard. I'll give money and faith value, okay? Chen Guang roared madly in his heart, his eyes quickly sweeping across the light curtain that only he could see, almost going blind. Big brother, stop messing around, this time I'm really going to go overboard. If you have any dissatisfaction with me, please come at me, okay? Don't hurt my fans. If worse comes to worst, I'll just die again, stop messing around. Perhaps the overly strong obsession finally made the heavenly Holy Grail choose to compromise. A line of words suddenly appeared on the light curtain. Light curtain technique. Paying faith value can protect the stability of the Redeemer's Cup. The amount of payment fluctuates according to the intensity of the impact the light curtain receives. Finally giving me a life-saving trump card, Chen Guang was extremely moved. For the first time, he felt that the Holy Grail was so reasonable. After a moment, under everyone's gaze, a light curtain slowly rose from the periphery of Lady Island with a diameter of 10 kilometers. The gorgeous golden-white light curtain gathered in the middle at a speed visible to the naked eye, finally forming a perfect dome in mid-air, exuding a soft light. Before the turbulent seawater could reach the ground of Lady Island, it was sucked back by this layer of light curtain like a sponge, and finally blocked outside, unable to advance an inch. The position of the light curtain was exactly the invisible wall that was intercepted by Chen Guang when he first arrived at Treasure Island, intending to take the horseshoe to smuggle him in, completely overlapping. Chen Guang let out a long sigh of relief. This place is my base. If I really go overboard, then wouldn't I have to lie in the water and pretend to be a god? What is this situation? This is the deep sea. Brooke looked up at the shining dome above his head, completely incoherent. Beside him, Watson took out an instrument and said with a trembling voice, "Sir Brooke. This is 100 million kilometers under the sea. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible." Brooke screamed. Watson shouted in a louder voice, "But it is indeed like this. 100 million kilometers." Hearing Watson's resolute statement, Bob lay on the ground. "Oh my God." Before this, the deepest record to the bottom of the sea was left by Magellan with his godlike Magellan, but after a short period of silence, everyone turned their heads to look at Chen Guang, who was standing on the balcony, and the look in their eyes was strange. This was definitely not the gaze they had when facing a human. They were treating Chen Guang as a god. This was not a miracle that was shouted out, but the work of a true god. Brooke slowly approached, his hollow eyes projecting a burning light. "Lord Wright is a man who is cared for by the sea of time." Everyone was on the verge of kneeling again. Chen Guang's heart ached, but he still had a warm smile on his face. He raised his hand slightly and said, "Everyone, don't be like this. It's just a small matter, not worth mentioning. I only brought you here on a whim. The greatness of the instantaneous sea cannot be understood without experiencing it for yourself. 200 million kilometers under the sea, how majestic, how beautiful, this is simply the most generous gift from the Creator. I will let you see the magnificent scenery of the sea." Wright said, "Let there be light." Light. He continued to pay the faith value and turned on the searchlight function. Rich, willful, saved for 100 years, how to spend it, how to spend it. Wright Island became the sun under the sea, the strong light from the center of the dome straight into the distance. This beam of light shone on the bottom of the sea, revealing a pitch-black giant that was so huge that it almost made one's mind stop at first glance. It was boundless. Chen Guang thought, "This is most likely the legendary undersea continent, the old man's tea foam." The group of people looked into the distance with a heart full of curiosity, and sure enough, they were captivated by the extremely spectacular scene. Brooke forcibly suppressed the excitement in his heart, and finally found an opportunity to approach Chen Guang and whispered, "Lord Wright, I have something to say to you. Mr. Brooke, if you have something to say, just say it. You and I don't need to be so polite." Chen Guang was puzzled by Brooke's solemnity. Brooke looked solemn. "This is a serious matter, shall we go over there to talk?" Chen Guang pursed his lips, feeling that Brooke was a bit strange, but seeing his pitiful appearance, he decided to take care of his mood. The two went to the corner, while the others rushed to the edge of Wright Island, wanting to get closer, wanting to see the scene of 200 million kilometers under the sea. This was not an opportunity that one could have at any time. "Lord Wright, I was indeed a member of the Straw Hat Pirates." Brooke hesitated a little, as if making a great decision, then said. Chen Guang curled his lips. "I know, Luffy, Sauron, Sanji, Nico, Robin, Nami, Chopper, Usopp, Frankie. As for you, Skeleton Brooke, you were the last to join the Straw Hat Pirates." "Oh my God. Lord Wright, are you a prophet? Why do you know everything?" Brooke was greatly frightened. Chen Guang mysteriously smiled. "Yes, I am indeed a prophet. But I was separated from my captains, after we found Gol Roger's treasure." "What?" This time, it was Chen Guang's turn to be shocked. The world of Transient Sea was constructed according to his memory of One Piece and Pirates of the Caribbean, but Chen Guang didn't expect that the biggest explosive point of Gol Roger's treasure would be imagined by the heavenly Holy Grail. Seeing that Chen Guang finally revealed a surprised expression, Brooke regained some confidence. "Lord, do you want to know what Gol Roger's treasure is?" "What?" "A letter. In the letter, he said that the master of the Eternal Hand is alive." "How inconceivable. We live in someone else's cup, we are pets raised in captivity. The more Brook spoke, the more excited he became. Abruptly, he pulled open his own dress. Chen Guang turned his head to look, and his pupils shrank. Brook's chest, indeed, had no flesh and blood, only bones. Lord, I am afraid that after death, I will never be able to wake up again. Therefore, many years ago, I stopped being reborn. My current appearance is due to the black magic I learned from the Dark Continent, which allows me to continue living in the form of a skeleton. While explaining, Brook removed the third rib from his chest, gently pulled it to both sides, and the rib broke into 2 pieces. His trembling fingers pulled out a piece of yellow paper from inside, and handed it to Chen Guang's hand. This is the letter that Gol Roger left for us. This is not Gol Roger's view alone, but after finding the travels of Poseidon, Magellan, Columbus, and the Eastern navigator Zheng He, he summed up the knowledge of all the sages. Brook didn't notice Chen Guang's complexion. Instead, he became more and more excited. Lord Right. Think about it, how sorrowful this is. In order to find out the truth of this mystery, my captain and other companions have already gone to the endless deep sea, and I am shouldering the hope of returning to the 5 great seas to pass on this secret. I know that by doing this, we are becoming enemies with the entire sea, but I have no way out. Gol Roger has already paid with his precious life, and he doesn't hesitate. I, Brook, am also willing to sacrifice everything for the people of the entire transient sea to obtain freedom. Brook fiercely knelt on the ground. Lord, I was already in despair, but your appearance let me see new hope. You have opened the era of the strong. Please lead us to break out of this terrible cage, and rebel against the master of the eternal hand. We must truly live. Chen Guang blankly looked at Brook. From this skeleton guy's eye sockets, projecting a fanatical light like that of a party member. His whole person is like a Spartan. Although I don't want to admit it, the master of the eternal hand that you must rebel against, is the fucking old man himself. You are making things very difficult for me. Brook, don't be too excited. Until now, how many people know and believe this matter? Chen Guang strived to calm himself down, calmly asking, simultaneously bending over to help Brook up. Until now, only me and my assistant Watson know. I have tried to talk to Teach, and Dutchman David, and Dread Sickle, but they all thought I was joking. I didn't dare to tell them that I received Gol Roger's letter, and could only talk to them. This is my own speculation. I already have no next resurrection, they are all our last hope. I can't let the curse of the transient sea spread from me to them. Because you are the son of God favored by the sea, I dare to talk to you. Brook's tone became more and more devout. Chen Guang very much wants to tell him that the old man isn't the son of God, the old man is your God. Regarding your experience, I am very sympathetic, but I am also helpless. Although I can use faith to stir up the wind and rain in the transient sea, I can't make this plane advance a step from the lower plane of the transcendent Holy Grail. But if this matter were to spread out, it would be too sad. At this time, Chen Guang's mind recalled a movie he watched a long time ago, The Wonderful Night at the Museum. In that movie, the toys were endowed with life, turning into one living person or animal after another. But no matter how real they look in the movie, they are in the end toys living on the screen. They are infinitely far away from the real world. When the movie ends, their lives are declared to have come to an end. At this time, the people in the transient sea, relative to Chen Guang and the real world he lives in, are a bit like the characters in The Wonderful Night at the Museum, real, yet illusory. Now, in this illusory world, someone suddenly tells him, I have discovered this world's secret. I beg you to lead us to rebel against this cruel fate, to overthrow the ruler of the eternal hand. A strong sense of incongruity and powerlessness makes Chen Guang at a loss. He is a little moved by Brook's faith and spirit. In addition, standing in front of him is not only Brook, but also the countless fearless warriors who have fallen in the pursuit of truth and freedom in the transient sea. Chapter 509. For example, Poseidon, who fought against the sea for his entire life and used his body to defeat Sea Emperor-level monsters, creating the first Sea Emperor-level powerhouse. Magellan, who spent tens of thousands of years traveling to every corner of the 5 seas and 1/3 of the outer sea, drew the first sketch of the eternal hand. He lived alone at the border of the Sea of Moments for tens of thousands of years. Every time he was reborn, he would rush to the corner where he could see the hands of eternity without hesitation. He would observe the hands of eternity subconsciously moving slightly, and he would find the changes in the skin lines of the giant hands. He visited all the continents and compiled the understanding and ideas of all the powerhouses of the past tens of thousands of years into a great masterpiece, and wrote a full stop with the last drop of blood. Gol Roger, who shouldered all the pressure and gathered all the knowledge left by the sages, came to a conclusion and gave up his life for it, and then opened the great age of pirates. Never compromising on the road to pursuing their dreams, giving up the easy life of a hegemon, and following the path of no return of their predecessors, the Straw Hat people bravely walked down. Every one of them was so great that even Chen Guang, the master of the transient sea, felt very insignificant. Chen Guang was almost suffocated by the persistence of this group of dolls. If he had the ability, he certainly hoped to give the entire transient sea a more real life, let them be free, and let the transient sea become the same as the universe where the earth is, become a real plane or universe. But, at least for now, Chen Guang couldn't do it, and didn't know what to do. He was helpless. Brooke, I understand your feelings, but right now we really can't do it, and there is nothing I can do. Chen Guang wanted to say some lies to comfort him, to give him some illusory hope, but as soon as the words came out of his mouth, he unconsciously spoke the truth. Brooke's excitement, like a candle broken by cold water, was completely extinguished in an instant. Chen Guang was a prophet in his mind. If a prophet said so, then perhaps there really was no hope. Moreover, Chen Guang's tone contained a certainty that only he himself knew. Unlike others, Chen Guang had already seen through the greatest secret of the instantaneous sea, so when he spoke, there was a hint of his own judgment in it. Perhaps Chen Guang himself didn't realize it, but Brooke could hear it. His eyes gradually darkened, and his bones that were constantly trembling from excitement and agitation also slowly calmed down. Lord Wright, do we really not have the slightest chance? Because of his absolute trust and worship, Brooke simply didn't ask where Chen Guang's judgment came from, only using a tone of seeking confirmation, wanting to hear this despairing answer again. Chen Guang nodded. Yes, no chance at all. Even if you have already created such a great art, with your help, the pirates of the Shuzhou Ocean are becoming stronger every day, and we even have 5 hegemons, and even a powerful prophet like you. Is it still impossible? Yes. Impossible. Brooke, don't ask me this question again, this matter is beyond your imagination. Chen Guang somewhat impatiently waved his hand. The more Brooke asked him, the more helpless Chen Guang was. Sorry, I didn't mean to make you unhappy. Brooke turned his face away, remaining silent. Chen Guang thought for a moment, then said, Brooke, what I said is that there is no chance now, but it doesn't mean that it will be impossible in the future. I don't want to easily make any promises, there are a lot of things that I can't say to you too clearly. But, what you want to do, what you want to obtain, is equally recognized by me. In the future, sooner or later, there will be a day when I will bring freedom to the people of the instantaneous sea. Therefore, you might as well try to live longer, so that you may have the opportunity to see that day. Chen Guang's mood was very complicated, and also very strange. He didn't understand why he wanted to bring this group of people to rebel against his rule, it was simply stupid. Perhaps what Liu Li said was really right, after all, he didn't have the potential to become a god. He couldn't be like the gods in other novels, seeing mortals as ants. Being moved by his own toy, and then wanting to help the toy get rid of his control, this was really King sad. On the other side, hearing his words that weren't a promise but were better than a promise, in the blink of an eye, Brooke's eyes lit up again. While the two were chatting, Buldev ran over with Bob in his arms. Bob shouted, "Sir, can you think of a way to let us go out a little bit?" Chen Guang was puzzled. "What's wrong?" Bob beamed with joy and said, "We found a floating rock at the edge of Lady Island. It's dazzling, too beautiful. It's simply a perfect creation of nature. Sir, if we can cast a statue of you from the 200 million li of rock at the bottom of the sea, how exciting it would be. Your first statue has been lost because of an accident, now it's time to rebuild a great statue for you." Bob's life was a flattering and unscrupulous life. All his skill points were added to flattery. At first, because he firmly believed that Chen Guang would wake up, in order to flatter him, he changed from an intelligence merchant to a scientist, developing phonograph shells. After developing phonograph shells, in order to better flatter, he changed from a scientist to a businessman, founding the Right Culture Communication Company. Now, when everyone found a floating rock together, the minds of others were only marveling at how beautiful the underwater scenery was, but he was the first to react. This could be used to make a tree statue. With this kind of stunt, if it was in the Qing dynasty, he would be a treacherous and capable minister like He Xin. Chen Guang took this opportunity to get rid of Brooke. In any case, he had already said this much to him. If he wanted to say anything more, he wouldn't be able to do anything. The group of people came to the edge of the light curtain, and sure enough, they found that not far away, there was a floating rock emitting a sparkling white light, hundreds of feet high, magnificent and magnificent. Chen Guang thought, if this thing was exchanged for jade gambling in the real world, it should be worth at least tens of billions, right? Can't we just throw something out and tie it up and pull it over? Chen Guang asked. Buldev took out his beloved huge sword that he had used for hundreds of years. "Sir, this is my personal weapon, it became like this as soon as I stretched it out." Chen Guang looked at Buldev's huge sword with a foot-long hilt and a 3-inch blade, and was silent for a long time. He felt that it would be easier to move the entire island forward. Greater teleportation. Run. It's falling down. Boom. The group of people struggled for a long time. Brooke, who had quite high artistic attainments, personally carved the statue, while Bob, Chen Guang's #1 fan, was responsible for providing artistic advice. Chen Guang felt that he had played enough underwater, so he once again summoned the light curtain, intending to return to the surface. If he hadn't seen it, he wouldn't have known, but when he saw it, he was startled, feeling as if his body had been hollowed out. When he summoned the light curtain, he didn't carefully look at the specific expenses, so he didn't understand the true meaning of the sentence. The payment amount will fluctuate according to the intensity of the impact. Only now did he realize how heavy his losses were. It was too late for regrets. Using the light curtain to resist the terrible water pressure at a depth of 200 million miles would consume trillions of faith points every second. Every second. Trillions. It hadn't even been half an hour, but his wealth was almost depleted. In the blink of an eye, his 100-year foundation would be destroyed in an instant. I'm going to be a fucking pauper. This is definitely a trap. It was a trap from the very beginning. Chapter 5:10. Chen Guang clenched his teeth thinking, it must be the heavenly holy grail purposely made me move to Lady Island, purposely tricked me into this water, purposely created such a high cost, just to make me return to before liberation in a second. Don't spout nonsense, it was not the heavenly holy grail. At this moment, Azure's voice rang in his mind. Who Who is so shameless, despicable, perverted, vulgar and inhumane? I am going against his 18 generations of ancestors. Azure was silent for a very long time. It was me. Oh my God. Just now I was controlled by a soul from beyond the heavens. Stop pretending. When you come out I will give you a big surprise. I will let you properly raise your temperament in the instantaneous sea. You will sleep for 100 years. If you want to become the true master of the heavenly holy grail just lying down like this, isn't that too easy? Big sister, I was wrong. Please give me one more chance. Please accept my sincere repentance. Hee hee. Oh right Azure, I have a question. You have also seen the situation in the instantaneous sea. Tell me, can I give all of them true life and souls? Just like my friends in the real world. Azure asked back, how do you know that your friends in the real world are true souls? How do you know that you are truly alive? Don't scare me. I am just joking, don't mind it. Let me tell you, the people in the momentary sea are different from you or your friend Ling Qin who accidentally entered here. Using your Eastern Chinese legends, they are 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical souls. They are missing 1 and 2 physical souls. Their souls are incomplete. So their so-called strength has no foundation, like bubbles under the sun. They will never be able to break through the shackles of the instantaneous sea, unless... Unless what? Unless you, the owner of the transcending heaven holy grail, are willing to pay a certain price to raise the level of the realm of the transient sea to the same level as the real universe you are currently in. Then, this entire world will be completed, and they will possess your so-called true life. Of course I am willing. That's not up to you. You're as weak as a chicken now. Wait until the day you complete all the trials of the world in the cup and save me, then you can think about it. Ignorant mortal, you don't know how difficult it is to create a real world. After Lu Li said this, there was no more movement. Chen Guang spread out his hands with an innocent look on his face. To put it bluntly, you're saying that I'm a noob. Do you have the ability to find another savior? TSK. When he returned to the surface of the sea, the missing corner of Leyte Island had disappeared forever on the way to the bottom of the sea. After the disaster, many things on the island had to be rebuilt. Chen Guang, on the other hand, was not in the mood to care about these things. After hesitating for a long time, he finally decided to let Bob announce the second business of Right Culture Communication Company. The Divination Holy Temple had officially opened for business. That's right, his current status was different from the past. Of course, he couldn't use the lowly name of a divination house anymore. Naming it the Holy Sanctum immediately made it seem lofty. Since he had already boasted that he was a prophet, other than the greater teleportation spell and the great sacred shield spell that he had bragged about previously, it was only right to add the so-called great divination spell. Lord Right, I have a good suggestion. Why don't we wait for the real holy temple to be built before we hang this plaque? The strange rocks from the deep sea that were knocked off the new statue can be used to build the holy temple. The effects will be very good. This place is too awkward now. Bob pointed at the divination holy temple that occupied an area of less than 3 square meters. There was only a canopy propped up by a stick, and the 4 words of calligraphy written by Chen Guang were hanging on the wall. After holding it in for a long time, he finally said this. Crossing his legs on the stool, Chen Guang patted the dining table that he had moved out of his mansion and calmly took a sip of his saliva. Bob, don't look down on this place. There's only a canopy, a dining table, and a stool. Actually, these are not important. The place where I, the prophet and sage Right, are at is the holy temple. Wherever I am, the holy temple will be. Bob's eyes lit up. He cupped his hands over his heart and said in a childish voice, "My lord is wise." Chen Guang smiled in satisfaction. Bob pointed to the side and asked, "Then, my lord, should I get someone to build a toilet holy temple at the side?" Chen Guang gave him a thumbs up. This fellow's perceptivity was really high. "And the dining holy temple, the holy temple where you and Lady Annie had sex, if not for the fact that you are still a child, I would have definitely beaten you up." Chen Guang glared at Bob fiercely. Then, he took out the purple devil's fruit juice and poured a cup on the table. The bright sunlight that fell from the sky shone on the fruit juice, revealing a crystal-clear glow. It looked extremely enchanting and beautiful. A faint fragrance wafted out from the cup. Although it wasn't strong, it made one feel relaxed and happy after smelling it. Chen Guang looked down at Bob and smiled sinisterly. "Bob, go. Go tell everyone that from today onwards, will be staying in the Divination Holy Temple. I will use the magic of the prophet that I possess to help everyone fulfill their wishes. Come, drink this cup of Ganges River. Oh, no, drink this cup of holy water of faith. Then I will help you find anyone or anything you want to find. No matter where it is hidden. I will be able to find it in any corner of the Sea of Time." Bob was alarmed. "That's amazing. My lord, give me a bucket." Chen Guang glared at him and drank some water. Then, he said heavily, "Of course, this magic is powerful, but the price is not cheap. After drinking it, you will lose the ability to speak forever." "My lord. You took the wrong cup. Awala guli pala kacha kacha ka ka ka." Half an hour later, after wasting 100 billion points of faith, Chen Guang finally managed to save his tongue. With his head covered in cold sweat, he smiled at Bob. "See that? I'm not joking. I'm telling you, Bob, that this holy water of faith is really terrifying." Thank the heavens, the production of faith had increased in the past few days. Otherwise, he would not have been able to sustain the expenditure of 100 billion points. As for where the growth was, Tintin indicated that the Buddha said, "I can't say." Chen Guang did not expect that his first guest would be Annie. "My dear bed leader, oh no, Captain, we can discuss this in private, but I really cannot give you this water." "Who are you looking for?" "Must I? If not, I can get Dolly to drink it on my behalf." Chen Guang rejected decisively. The Dolly that Chen Guang was referring to was a famous chatterbox on Annie, the kind that irritated people. Annie shook her head. "No, this is my own matter. Don't torture Dolly. I want to find that traitor, Jack, and tear him to pieces. I still don't know what happened between you and him back then." Chen Guang was very surprised. He did not expect Annie to hate Jack Sparrow so much. "He took away all the souvenirs you left me back then," Annie said angrily. Chen Guang was at a loss. "Souvenirs?" Annie nodded and moved closer to Chen Guang's ear. She gritted her teeth and whispered, "Yes. Jack Sparrow is as cunning as a fox. He knows that the biggest secret that allowed us to not die on and royal is related to you. So, he took away all the clothes you have ever worn, your saber, everything you have. Including your underwear. When he escaped, he jumped into the sea wearing all your clothes. I seriously suspect that all 7 of your underwear were worn by him." Chen Guang was furious. This is indeed unforgivable. Chapter 511. After spending a lot of effort, Chen Guang was finally able to temporarily settle Annie down. Soon, Chen Guang had to face the second guest that made things difficult for him, Brooke. "Sir Wright, I want to ask you to help me find Captain Luffy. I just want to know if they are still alive." Brooke looked straight at Devil Juice and said in a pious tone. Chen Guang was reluctant to let him drink this thing. Brooke was one of his right-hand men. But this request seemed impossible to refuse. Brooke, besides the common language, do you know any other language? Chen Guang asked. The common language he spoke was medieval English. Brooke shook his head. No. Chen Guang grinned, and asked Bob to bring over the newly made leaflet. Sorry, divination must use the most solid belief in your heart to find what you want to see the most. The function of this cup of holy water is to extract the obsession in your heart and pour it into the divination. The price is to take away your ability to use language. But because of me, I mistakenly drank a cup just now. Now it no longer needs the common language, so it is useless for you to drink it. Chen Guang made up nonsense. In any case, only he himself understood, so he could say whatever he wanted. He also had no choice. He couldn't let others know that this was all nonsense just because Brooke and the others wanted to participate in divination. He didn't need to drink the juice to find what he wanted to find. There is no wall in the world that doesn't have a crack. Chen Guang must make himself maintain a certain sense of mystery in the sea of transient. So far, his performance was different enough. If he exposed more things, in case Brooke or Annie discovered his true secret, there would be a huge risk of losing the faith of everyone in the sea of transient. Although the secret that the Eternal Hand was still alive was temporarily hidden in the heart of Brooke and Watson, but it was clear that in the long history of the Sea of Transient, there has never been a lack of strong people who used their lives and faith to explore the truth. This was like the wheel of history, unstoppable. With an extremely long history and a population of 178 billion people, there would always be a continuous emergence of amazing experts. They had experienced a life full of opportunities and risks, step by step reaching the peak, and finally embarked on the path of seeking the truth. The era 2,000 to 3,000 years ago belonged to Luffy and the Straw Hat Pirates. In the current era, there was Brooke, Annie Polly, Blackbeard Teach, and the rapidly rising Jack Sparrow. Who knew how many strong people would appear in the next era? Of course, Chen Guang, their imaginary enemy, was not afraid of these people's efforts and struggles. He even cheered for them in his heart and personally participated in it, contributing his strength. Of course, Chen Guang was not cultivating enemies for himself, but he knew that these people's resistance would never succeed. The only one who could truly change the world was Chen Guang himself. However, it was precisely because Chen Guang could see their despair that he admired their persistence. As for now, for the time being, let them live in this idea that they knew a little bit, but couldn't see through it. Brooke was very disappointed, but Watson suddenly stood up from the side. Sir, I can speak a total of 7 languages. Let me drink the holy water of faith, and let me fulfill Lord Brooke's wish. Brooke waved his hand. No. Watson turned his head and stubbornly looked at Brooke. Lord Brooke, I have followed you for hundreds of years. I know your heart's desire. For me, not being able to speak is nothing. As long as I can continue to follow Lord Brooke, my life has meaning. Fulfilling Lord Brooke's wish is my, Watson's, obsession. Without waiting for Brooke to speak again, Watson fiercely picked up the cup on the table and ferociously gulped it down. Watson. Brooke couldn't say anything else. Chen Guang slightly nodded, put a box on the table, and then said, Watson, in your heart, desperately think of what you want to see the most, and then look inside. Divination ball, no, perhaps it should be called a telescope, was embedded in this wooden box by Chen Guang, and the eyepiece was embedded in the hole, resembling a kaleidoscope. As for the obsession in Watson's heart, it was pure nonsense. The only one who could really influence the scene in the telescope was Chen Guang himself. What he wanted others to see, others could see. After a long time, Watson turned around with a flushed face. It was obvious that his mood was extremely agitated. Woo-loo-loo-loo-loo. He couldn't speak. But it didn't matter, he could still write. Brooke pulled Watson far away. he didn't want Watson to speak of this matter in public. Chen Guang watched the two leave. At this time, his heart was also quite moved. The same scene not only appeared in the telescope, but also appeared in Chen Guang's heart. Luffy and his party didn't die. They broke through all obstacles, and after resurrecting again and again, relying on the bonds between companions and their formidable individual strength, they gathered together again and again. At this time, they were living on a certain floating island at the end of the Sea of Time. Next to this floating island was the legendary transparent barrier that could never be broken, which was also the side wall of Chen Guang's cup. Apart from this, the so-called Eternal Hand had already disappeared. In fact, it didn't really disappear, but at this time, Chen Guang was holding the cup and drinking water in the outside world, and when people looked outside from the cup, they naturally couldn't see anything clearly. Compared to the people in the Sea of Time, Chen Guang's Eternal Hand was really too huge. Vaster than the sea, vaster than the sky, the naked eye of mortals simply couldn't distinguish this hand from the heaven and earth. If it was still like before, with enough distance between the hand and the cup, it could still be barely distinguished, but now, there was nothing that could be done. In addition, Watson had mastered a total of 7 languages including Spanish, Portuguese, German, and so on. Under the effect of the devil juice, they were naturally transferred to Chen Guang's mind. There were a total of tens of thousands of residents on Lady Island, among which, there were only a few who were as knowledgeable as Watson and knew many languages. In addition, not everyone had the belief that they must find someone. In addition, for the language that he had already mastered, no matter how firm the other party's desire was, Chen Guang wouldn't agree to perform great divination for him. The reason was very sufficient. Although your belief is very devout, perhaps fate has not come yet. You can't get the response of the great divination, it will no longer accept your language. I deeply sympathize with your experience, but I can't help you even if I want to. This isn't God's punishment, but God's guidance. God is telling you that you should forget about the burden of the past and face the future with a more optimistic attitude. After a busy day, at least thousands of people came to try because of their obsession. The situation was better than expected. Chen Guang performed great divination on about 400 people, and very easily completed the learning of 676 languages. Of course, the biggest reason for this was that there were many people on Lady Island who were experts selected from all over the Sea of Time to cultivate. They came from the 5 big seas and the more remote outer seas, so it was reasonable that they had a wide variety of languages. However, Chen Guang wasn't too excited. The smooth start was completely within his expectations. The truly difficult part was still the various super small languages that followed. At night, when he returned to the mansion, Annie was already sitting on the table in her armor, waiting for him. "My dear, please help me find that shameful traitor, Jack Sparrow." Annie smiled, but she couldn't stop the black gas from spreading out from her body. It was very obvious that she was furious when she thought of old Jack. Helpless, Chen Guang poured out a glass of fruit juice and was about to drink it himself. Annie hurriedly stopped him. However, Chen Guang waved his hand and said, "It's fine, I'm a prophet. I can deal with the after effects of the great divination." He didn't want to admit it, but the truth was that even though the price of drinking the devil's fruit juice was very high, the taste of this thing was not to be underestimated. There was a touch of coolness when it entered the mouth, and when it went down the stomach, it could be iced down the throat all the way to the stomach. His mouth was filled with a delicate fragrance, and the aftertaste was endless. The cool sweetness mixed with the pure sourness was simply the most delicious drink in the world. As a knowledgeable person who had tasted countless cola, orange juice, Fanta, Sprite, Rising Sun, Wanglaji, Hekazeng, Nutrition Express, and many other drinks in modern society, Chen Guang felt that the taste of these things couldn't even compare to 1/10,000th of the old man's devil's fruit juice. The devil's fruit juice had a devil-like allure, and one would immediately become addicted after drinking it by mistake. I can't take it anymore, I'm addicted. Let me take another sip. Unlike others who couldn't speak after drinking it, Chen Guang felt that he could constantly save himself. After drinking it, he pretended to pounce in front of the divination telescope and stared into it. Chen Guang had long known that old Jack had an evil streak in him. He was greedy and selfish, quick-witted, and cunning. He was unruly and crafty. Back on the Royal, he was used to using a large knife to shave his beard, pretending to be boorish to fool others. But no one hated him, because under his countless flaws, he still had a pure soul. He was once a military officer on Middle-earth, commanding a fleet. But later, because he couldn't stand seeing the nobles of Middle-earth trampling on the slaves, he released a ship full of slaves that he was supposed to be escorting. Later on, he was wanted by the nobles and eventually became a pirate. He had a mischievous personality, but he wasn't a bad person, and he was strong. Of course, if he had directly told Annie that he wanted to leave the Royal to start his own business, Annie might not have stopped him. However, he had set his sights on Chen Guang's personal belongings and had taken away the second combat team. This made Annie furious. As the scenery in the binoculars rapidly shifted, Chen Guang's gaze followed it and gradually, the pitch-black surface of the ocean was covered in specks of light. Chen Guang's vision quickly zoomed in, and he saw a large fleet of ships mixed together on the surface of the sea. Upon seeing this scene, Chen Guang's pupils constricted slightly. The sounds of cannons, gunpowder gunfire, metal clashing of swords, and roars seemed to travel through time and space to reach Chen Guang's ears. The scene continued zooming in, and on the deck of every ship, he could see a frenzied battle. Blood was splattered all over the deck, and there were broken limbs everywhere. Who was Jack Sparrow exchanging fire with? Chen Guang frowned slightly, and continued zooming in, but his mind recalled a scene from a long time ago. Right, sooner or later I'll have my own ship. I'll paint the entire ship a beautiful black. This will make me appear dignified. Under the clear and cold moonlight, the sea sparkled. A light breeze gently blew against the sails, producing a hoo-hoot sound. Old Jack sat on the railing of the Royal and, ferociously gulping down a mouthful of wine. Then, he tossed the empty cowhide bag into the water as he spoke. Old Jack, you don't have many years left. Don't think about this. Chen Guang sat on a large wooden barrel beside him, tearing a roasted chicken leg in his mouth. You don't understand, right? I have a premonition that I'm not an ordinary person. I won't die so easily. Alright, if one day you can really get your own ship, I'll help you think of a great name. Didn't you want black paint? Why don't we call it the Black Pearl? Chen Guang chuckled. Unexpectedly, old Jack was very satisfied. Oh. My right, you're really a genius. This name is really great. The Pearl of the Sea, a black pearl. I want to load my black pearl with the most powerful cannons. I also need to find sails blessed by the sea god, and then replace them with keels made from the spine of the most powerful sea beasts. How about it? My idea isn't bad, right? Why don't you find a lake of immortality to soak your ship? So that your ship's hull will never be damaged. Chen Guang continued to tease him. Unexpectedly, old Jack was fascinated. Is that so? In this endless sea, is there really a spring of immortality? Then I'll have to drink my fill first before soaking the ship. At present, Chen Guang was looking at such a black pearl. Under the moonlight and firelight, the pitch-black hull of the ship emitted a demonic radiance. Amidst the intense crossfire, the gigantic sails were unceasingly struck by bullets and cannons. Yet, the firepower strangely passed through the sails, leaving the sails unscathed. Instead, the areas struck by the firepower transformed into black mist. Indeed, this was augmented by black magic, or perhaps, the sails blessed by the sea god. The gigantic black pearl nimbly maneuvered its body. Only by combining the best helmsman and black magic, could the gigantic ship display such nimble movements on the sea. This was the mighty Black Pearl. However, its opponent similarly couldn't be underestimated. It was a gigantic golden ship inlaid with a dragon head ram. Its entire body was actually forged from metal, yet the radiance it emitted wasn't a simple metallic luster. It should be augmented by some kind of magic. Both parties unleashed their full strength, colliding and bombarding each other frantically on the sea surface. Every collision would emit an ear-piercing screech, and raise massive waves. The cannons of the gigantic golden ship seemed to be more advanced, and its firepower density far surpassed that of the Black Pearl. Nevertheless, the Black Pearl was more nimble. Augmented by black magic, its wooden hull allowed it to fight equally with its opponent. The distance between them was pulled closer once again. Finally, through a brief flickering of firelight, Chen Guang could clearly see the pirate flag on the sail of the gigantic golden ship. Shit! It was a simple drawing of the old man's handsome face. It was Ling Qin and her Radiance pirates. The unlucky Jack was battling Ling Qin. As expected, in the darkness, two figures flew out from the watchtowers on their respective masts. They crossed a distance of several hundred meters and collided fiercely in midair, creating a sound that was even more deafening than the sound of cannon fire. The goateed Jack Sparrow was sent flying backwards. In his hand was the broadsword that Chen Guang had been gripping ever since he met him. On the other side was the one-armed, one-eyed Ling Qin. At present, the iron hook embedded into her severed arm was swallowing and emitting a bizarre chilling glow. Her metallic artificial limb had been modified into a sharp cone shape. Chapter 5:12. Seeing Ling Qin's appearance, Chen Guang was puzzled. It had been 100 years since he entered the Sea of Moments. Logically speaking, Ling Qin should have been reborn at least once. When she first appeared here, she was crippled. At that time, Chen Guang did not think much about it. Later on, when he thought about it, he felt that it was strange. After all, Ling Qin could not have entered with her body, but with her soul. Since that was the case, why was she still crippled? Now she should have been reborn once, but her body was still incomplete. This didn't make sense. Could it be that she was the same as me, and had an immortal body in the Sea of Moments? The more Chen Guang thought about it, the more he felt that it was highly possible. Using Lori's words, the people in the Sea of Moments, under the special rules, had their souls incomplete. But Ling Qin was the same as him, having a complete soul compared to others. Thus, it was not hard to explain why Ling Qin did not age in the Sea of Moments. Forget it, let's not care about this for now and quickly go catch her. Annie, I found Jack. Chen Guang turned and said to Annie. Annie stood up. Where? I'll set off now. Darling, wait for me for a few years, I'll catch that old bastard. Chen Guang smiled. It's not that troublesome. Give me a minute. The war between the Radiance pirates and the Black Pearl pirates was still ongoing. Both sides suffered losses, but overall, Ling Qin held the advantage. Whether it was the strength of the pirates under her banner or individual strength, Ling Qin and her Radiance pirates were slightly stronger than Jack Sparrow. Madam Cord. Why is this? I've never seen you before, nor provoked you. Why did you suddenly declare war on me? Has your arrogance reached such a level? Even if I lose today, I will make a comeback. You will pay the price for your arrogance. Old Jack stood on the mast of his Black Pearl, roaring fiercely. He had a perplexed look on his face. In the Sea of Moments, although it was common for big fish to eat small fish, but I'm not a small fish. I'm one of the 28 ocean emperors like you. You're bullying me too much." Ling Qin looked at him from afar, her expression cold. "Jack Sparrow, do you think I don't know that you snuck up to my ship in the evening? Although I don't know what you're coveting, your provocation is enough to make me wary. I, Cod, am used to striking first." Old Jack wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Although the two of them were both ranked as one of the 28 ocean emperors, the transient sea was simply too vast. The chances of them meeting each other by chance were extremely small. Previously, the two factions had never interacted with each other. In the afternoon, the two fleets finally met on the surface of the sea and brushed past each other. At that time, he only glanced at the sail of the Radiant pirate group from afar. He did not look too closely, but afterward, he felt that the pirate flag on the sail was very familiar. Later, he couldn't hold back his curiosity, so he stealthily turned the fleet around and dived into the sea to take a closer look. He didn't expect to be discovered. "Miss Cord, please believe me. I mean no harm." Old Jack knew that no one would believe his explanation. Even he himself felt that it was absurd. Back then, he had seen Leet turn into nothingness in midair with his own eyes. How could he see that kid's portrait on the flag of another rising pirate force? There's no point in saying more. "Jack Sparrow, go and be reborn with a heart full of regret." More than 100 years of fighting on the sea had made Ling Qin, who was born in modern society and had experienced the influence of the new era. However, her life was full of misfortune. In the end, she died in despair but was strangely resurrected in the transient sea. She had become unprecedentedly powerful. In the past 100 years, she had used this decisive style to rapidly increase her personal strength, leading her Radiant pirate group to rise like a comet. In fact, Ling Qin herself didn't know what she wanted. Perhaps only by constantly fighting like this could she gradually feel that she was still alive. But from time to time, Ling Qin would see the people around her slowly grow old and eventually return to the sea. Those loyal and powerful crew members could return to their warships when they were a few years old, a dozen years old, or even a little older. They called this an undying rank expert. But she herself was forever young, and her body was still incomplete. Ling Qin's heart was very complicated and tangled. She would often think that there was no meaning in living like this. Other than continuously becoming stronger and leading this group of loyal subordinates on expeditions, as a modern woman, her life seemed to be quite boring. Just as the battle between the two sides was about to enter a white-hot stage, a deafening sound suddenly rang out from the side of the sea. Everyone in the battlefield was deafened by this loud sound. The intense tremors caused Jack Sparrow, who was holding onto his blade and advancing forward, to stagger and almost fall down. Ling Qin held onto the mast tightly. She didn't know what was happening, but the power behind this terrifying tremor made her feel terrified. One of the 5 overlords had come to mediate. There was no reason for that. Even an overlord wouldn't be this powerful. This was the might of the world. In the blink of an eye, a huge wave came gushing over, stirring up the seawater. The warships of the two pirate groups were like leaves struggling in the middle of a raging storm. Both sides couldn't be bothered to continue fighting. Rays of black magic light lit up one after another, and they finally managed to resist the impact of this sudden huge wave. Under the moonlight, a white silhouette that was like a mountain gradually appeared, getting closer and closer. The white silhouette's light rapidly converged, but it turned into a huge black silhouette under the moonlight, giving the two pirate groups a suffocating pressure. Ling Qin opened her mouth slightly. Oh my god, this is a floating island. As an outsider, she might not understand the significance of a floating island, but Jack Sparrow did. The impact he received was even more intense. Oh my god of the sea. How can someone control a floating island? And it's so huge. Even though the floating islands in the Sea of Moments were only floating on the surface of the water, because of the mysterious sea god's might, every floating island was exceptionally stable and extremely difficult to move. Moving a huge island with a diameter of 10 kilometers had long surpassed the limits of the strongest overlord in the Sea of Moments. It also exceeded Jack Sparrow's common sense. Finally, the black silhouette gradually approached, and a few small boats rushed out from the floating island. Jack Sparrow's face was ashen. What kind of terrifying force was the other party? Could it be that an existence above the overlord had appeared in the sea? Old Jack, am done for. Bastard Jack. You're dead. Just as old Jack was thinking about this, a stern shout came from one of the boats that had rushed out, causing him to shiver all over. Damn it. Annie. Mamma mia. I'm really done for. Jack Sparrow's legs went soft, and he screamed as he jumped down from the Black Pearl's mast, falling head first into the sea. He couldn't care less, he had to run first. As a traitor, old Jack had always hidden as far as he could from the Royal Pirate Group. After hiding for over 100 years, you actually drove a floating island to catch up to us today. How can I stand against you? Trying to run. Annie snorted coldly, and suddenly jumped out from the small boat. The tip of her foot stepped on the surface of the sea, and she shot out like lightning. Black gas surged from her body, and she roared forward like a black dragon. Her speed was so fast that it made people's hair stand on end. This time, old Jack looked like he couldn't escape this calamity. An overlord rank wasn't just a little stronger than an ocean emperor rank. Chen Guang wasn't in a hurry to follow. Don't be fooled by Annie's violent rage. In fact, Chen Guang knew that she would definitely be soft-hearted. But it didn't matter, old Jack's mistake wasn't worthy of death. He could still be taught a lesson. Not paying attention to Annie's movements in pursuit of old Jack, Chen Guang and Brooke steered the small boat towards Ling Qin's ship. Ling Qin looked at the gradually approaching small boat, her face bewildered. She was hesitating whether she should take the initiative to attack, but of the two people standing on the small boat, the taller one gave her too much pressure, making her extremely fearful. She knew Annie's name. Rumor had it that she had stayed on the Sage's Island for the past 100 years, which was also known as Right Island. Today, Right Island had undoubtedly become the most powerful force in the entire Sea of Time's 5 seas. It had 2 Overlord rank powerhouses, including Buldev and other famous Ocean Emperor rank powerhouses, as well as countless undead powerhouses. Annie had gone to capture Jack Sparrow, so this tall and skinny figure must be the other Overlord rank powerhouse, Brooke. Unrivaled. What was their purpose in coming here? Did they come to capture Jack Sparrow? Or did the secret of my immortality reach their ears? What kind of person was the rumored sage Right? Wise? Generous? Benevolent? Or was it the greed and hypocrisy hidden beneath the surface? Or was it the explosive news that broke out in the last 2 days, that he possessed tyrannical abilities in bed that all women except Annie were unable to withstand? How powerful was he? Seeing the small boat getting closer and closer, Ling Qin's breathing became more and more rapid. When she finally saw the faces of the 2 people standing on the boat, her breathing suddenly stopped. Chen Guang. This thought exploded in her heart like thunder, and Ling Qin almost blurted out. Ever since she had inexplicably arrived here, Ling Qin's heart hid too many mysteries, but she had no one to narrate them to, and no one could give her an answer. But now Chen Guang had appeared. Meeting an old friend in a foreign land could make one's eyes brim with tears, but meeting an old friend in a different world could simply make one hysterical. At this moment, Ling Qin was feeling this way. She softly sat down on the deck, tears falling like rain, while in her heart she repeatedly mocked her own stupidity. She should have known that right was the meaning of light. Even if it was just out of curiosity, she should have gone to Right Island earlier to see what was going on. But it was precisely because she was a foreigner that she hid too many cowardly thoughts in her heart, and was unwilling to have too many interactions with other pirate forces, which led to today's brushing shoulders for 100 years. With Chen Guang's current reputation in the Sea of Time, it was naturally impossible for Ling Qin not to have heard of him. Even in her own bedroom, there was a phonograph with his music on it. But she thought it was just a coincidence, and at the same time she was afraid of the two prominent hegemons of Right Island. She was afraid that more people would know the secret of her immortality. After several struggles in her heart, she finally chose to turn a blind eye. Of course, later Chen Guang simply fell into a deep sleep, and Brooke announced to the public that the sage was in seclusion. Ling Qi knew that she wouldn't be able to see him even if she went, so she simply gave up on the idea. As for the letter that Chen Guang had written to her, she didn't know that it had long been lost in the belly of that sea beast. Now that he had finally come, Ling Qin felt that she had thousands of words to ask him. As a foreigner who had lived alone in this world for more than 100 years, even thinking of a cherry tree on earth would make her tear up, let alone Chen Guang who had saved her life. Lord Wright, do you need me to subdue her first? Ms. Cord's reputation isn't very good, and she has a very bad temper. Brooke slightly bowed to Chen Guang and said. Since Chen Guang showed Watson the scene where Luffy and others were still alive, Brooke's respect for Chen Guang increased. Chen Guang shook his head. It's okay, Brooke, you stay here, she can't hurt me. With that, Chen Guang took a step forward. Brooke's eyes flashed, thinking, finally, I'm going to see Lord Wright display his hockey. Although everyone knew that Lord Wright, who was able to fight with Captain Annie for several hours, was very strong, but no one had ever seen him use hockey to walk on the waves. Splash! Chen Guang dived into the water and swam forward like a fish. His speed was astonishing. Brooke covered his face. A sage, a dignified prophet, actually jumped into the water and swam over. If you had said so earlier, I would have carried you up. His prestige was swept to the ground. Ms. Cord, can you please throw a rope down? After a long time, Ling Qin faintly said to the wet Chen Guang in front of her, I really didn't expect to meet you here. I thought I was just one of those cliched characters in novels who transmigrated after death, but now it seems that things aren't so simple. Chen Guang smiled and looked at Ling Qin for a long time. To be honest, I am also very surprised, but it's great that you are still alive. This shows that good people have good karma. In the end, Chen Guang didn't tell Ling Qin the truth about the instantaneous sea, and Ling Qin also refused Chen Guang's invitation to join Right Island. Unlike Chen Guang who could leave at any time, Ling Qin couldn't leave this world, so she must hide the secret of not aging deeper. In this world, although she was powerful, she was more lonely than anyone else. In fact, she even lied to her own crew. Although her body didn't age, she would constantly think of ways to make herself look older as time passed. Moreover, she suddenly disappeared from her fleet 20 to 30 years ago, leaving behind a suicide note. After a dozen years, she dressed up very young and returned to the ship, creating the illusion that she had died once. In the Radiant Pirate crew, she could maintain her prestige, and no one would suspect her, but if she joined Right Island, she would be exposed sooner or later. As for Ling Qin's future, Chen Guang also didn't know how to arrange it. She was an anomaly in the instantaneous sea, with a soul similar to his and not aging, but she didn't have the identity and status of a true master of the whole world like him. The two didn't even talk for long. When Chen Guang told Ling Qin that he would leave the instantaneous sea sooner or later and return to reality, Ling Qin planned to quickly leave. In the real world, she had already become a box of ashes, and the current Chen Guang had no way to bring her out. No matter what, live on bravely and strongly. Standing in front of you is a man with unlimited possibilities. In the future, sooner or later, I will be able to let your husband and your child appear in front of you again. Before the two of them said their goodbyes, Chen Guang left behind the most important promise he had made so far. Ling Qin, who was standing at the stern of the ship, turned around and smiled. Thank you. With these words of yours, I can live for another 100 million years. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.